The lane curves gently to the left, and through the thinning mist, the mill building forms itself out of the grey. It is a long 4-story structure of local stone, its walls thick and unadorned, pierced by tall windows with many small panes of glass. The chimney rises straight and square, a dark column against the pale sky, and from its top a thin, lazy wisp of smoke climbs and disappears. This is a woolen mill, known for its fine worsted and now for its horsehair weaving, and in the early light it seems almost a natural part of the valley, as if it had grown there from the rock itself. The stream that powers the great water wheel runs in a stone-lined channel beside the mill, its water clear and brown, and the wheel turns slowly with a deep, wet creak that echoes in the yard. You cross the cobbled yard where a single cart horse stands between its shafts, its head low and its breath steaming in the cool air, and you pause for just a moment to look at its mane, a thick cascade of coarse black hair that falls stiffly against the neck. This is the hair you know so well, the same material that waits for you inside, and you note without thinking the way the individual strands catch the scant light, their natural curve and resilience. Then you turn to the heavy wooden door set into the mill wall, its iron hinges blackened with age, and you push it open with a shoulder that knows exactly the weight of it. Inside, the noise of the stream fades and is replaced by a vast, hushed stillness. The entrance leads you through a short passageway, floored with flagstones worn into shallow depressions by decades of footsteps, and then you step into the weaving shed itself. The room stretches away from you for a considerable distance, a long open space supported by thick timber posts. Rows of looms stand in orderly ranks, each one a sturdy frame of wood and iron, their surfaces dark with oil and use. At this hour, before the day's work begins, they are silent, their shuttles resting, their harnesses motionless. Gas lamps hang from the ceiling on long metal rods, their flames turned low, and they cast a calm, yellowish light that reflects softly on the flagstone floor. In that light, dust motes drift and swirl slowly, suspended in the still air, moving with a grace that has no urgency. The shed smells of raw wool and lubricating oil, of old wood and damp stone, and underneath it all there is a faint, clean animal scent from the horsehair stored in bundles along one wall. You walk down the central aisle between the looms, your footsteps quiet on the stone, and you pass a number of machines of various sizes, each designed for a different type of fabric. None of them will be your concern today. Your loom stands slightly apart from the others, in a space of its own near a tall window that looks out onto the hillside. It is a specialized piece of equipment, a horsehair plaiting loom, and it is built differently from the woolen looms that surround it. The frame is heavier, made of seasoned oak and braced with iron, and the weaving bed is wider and flatter, set at a height that allows you to work comfortably from a seated position. Above the bed, a series of bobbins wound with pale linen thread hang on a creel, their threads descending in a silent, parallel fall to the harnesses and reeds below. To one side, a travelling carriage runs on a greased metal track, and from it a row of small weighted clips dangles, each one designed to hold a single strand of stiff horsehair. The whole arrangement looks intricate but entirely logical, the kind of machine that makes sense only to someone who has spent years in its company. You remove your jacket, a simple brown tweed worn soft at the elbows, and hang it on a wooden peg set into the nearby post. Your apron, a heavy canvas garments, stiff with the dust of 100 previous days, comes off the same peg, and you tie it around your waist, the strings falling into a familiar knot. Then you turn to the small oil lamp that sits on a bracket fixed to the loom frame. Its brass reservoir is cool, the wick untouched, and you take a box of lucifers from a small shelf under the bench. The match strikes with a quiet, rasping scratch, and for an instant there is the sharp smell of sulphur before the flame steadies into a small, bright tongue of yellow. You touch it to the wick, and the lamp catches, flaring briefly before you adjust the thumb wheel until the light settles into a soft, round glow. That light falls directly onto the weaving bed, illuminating the pale warped threads that are already stretched and waiting, the remnants of yesterday's work, and it picks out the dark parallel lines of the horsehair that has already been woven into a short length of firm, dense fabric. Now there is the small, unhurried ritual of preparing your workspace. On the shelf below the lamp, your tools rest where you left them at the end of the previous day, a wide-toothed comb, a small pair of shears, a thin awl for adjusting tight strands, and a smooth wooden block used for beating in the weft. You take them down one at a time, wiping each one with a clean rag that hangs from the bench edge. The comb's teeth are worn to a dull polish from pulling through countless hanks of coarse hair, and you run your thumb over them to check for any burr or bend. There are none. The shears open and close with a quiet, oiled precision, their blades meeting perfectly, and you place them on the bench to your right, where your hand can find them without looking. The awl and the beating block go to the left, alongside a small, shallow bowl of tallow for lubricating the carriage track. Everything has its place, and putting it there is a sequence of motions that your body knows so well it requires no conscious thought, like tying a bootlace or lifting a cup of tea. When the tools are arranged, you turn your attention to the horsehair bundles themselves. Against the wall, on a series of wooden shelves, the bundles are stacked in rough brown paper tied with twine. Each one contains a hank of prepared tail hair, the longest and stiffest strands, uniformly black with an occasional strand of deep brown that is almost indistinguishable from the rest. You select a bundle that was opened yesterday, its paper folded back, and you lift it onto the sorting table that stands between your loom and the window. The tabletop is smooth from years of use, with a slight dip in the center where countless hands have spread and combed the hair. You loosen the twine and open the bundle fully, and the smell of the hair rises to meet you, a clean, warm, earthy scent, like dry grass and animal hide, with a faint soapy note from the washing process. You run your fingers into the mass of hair, lifting a section and letting it fall back. The strands are glossy where the light from the window touches them, a deep, lustrous black with a bluish undertone, and they are slightly coarse to the touch, each one round and springy. Good weaving hair has a natural curve, a memory of the tail's movement, and when you bend a single strand between your fingers, it resists, then snaps back into a gentle arc. This resilience is what makes the finished fabric so durable, able to be stretched over a curved chair seat and to hold its shape for decades without sagging or wearing through. You begin the slow, patient process of sorting. Taking a small handful, you draw it through your fingers, feeling for any imperfections, a strand that is too thin, one that is split, the rare piece that is of a different, softer texture. These you set aside into a small basket where they will be collected for other, lesser uses. The good strands, long and even, you lay flat on the table, aligning them so that all the root ends point in one direction and all the tip ends in the other. This alignment is crucial because when the hair is woven, it must lie smoothly and not fight against itself. As you work, your hands move with a slow, steady certainty, the fingers slightly roughened and stained from years of handling oiled metal and raw fiber. The skin on your palms is thick, and the tips of your thumb and forefinger are nearly smooth where the hair has polished them. When a small pile of aligned hair has accumulated, you reach for the wide-toothed comb. You draw it through the hair in a single long stroke, starting near the root ends and pulling smoothly down to the tips. The comb makes a soft, rustling sound, a kind of whispered rasp, and after each stroke you tap the comb against the table edge to dislodge the few loose fibers that cling to the teeth. The hair becomes more ordered with each pass, the strands lying parallel and flat, their collective surface reflecting the light like a dark, still pool. This combing is repeated, stroke after stroke, until the section is perfectly smooth and all the tiny tangles have been worked out. Then you roll the hair into a loose cylindrical bundle, not tight enough to crease it, and place it in a shallow tray to your right. This tray will feed your work for the morning, and you will fill it with several such bundles before you even sit down at the loom. Outside the window, the mist is beginning to lift. The hillside that rises beyond the mill yard is becoming visible, its green slopes patched with darker gorse and dotted with the white shapes of sheep that are only now beginning to move. The light inside the shed shifts slightly, the gas lamps no longer the only illumination, as a pale, watery daylight begins to filter through the many-paned windows. You work on, taking another handful of hair, drawing it through your fingers, aligning it, combing it, rolling it. The rhythm has a slow, meditative pulse that exists alongside the sound of the water wheel and the distant murmur of the stream. There is no hurry, no sense that the task must be rushed to completion. The day ahead is long and full of the same quiet industry, and there is a deep, satisfying contentment in the simple act of preparing the material, of turning a chaotic, tangled bundle into ordered, useful lengths. At last the tray holds enough aligned bundles to begin the weaving proper, and you brush the loose hair fragments from the table into your hand, then drop them into the scrap basket. The table is clean, the tools are in their places, and the lamp is burning steadily with a tiny constant hiss. You walk to the small stone trough in the corner of the shed, where a cold tap runs continuously into a basin, and you splash water on your hands, drying them on the front of your apron. The water is mountain cold, and it sharpens your senses for a moment, a brief refreshing pause in the morning's unfolding. Returning to your loom, you settle onto the wooden bench. The seat is hard, but shaped by long use to the contours of your body, and you adjust your position until you are sitting upright, your feet resting lightly on the treadles, and your hands resting on your thighs. From this angle, the warp threads stretch away from you in a perfect, silent fan, each one a pale line disappearing into the heddles and reeds. The woven section of fabric that is already rolled onto the cloth beam below catches the lamplight. Its surface a dense, even texture of black dashes on a cream ground, and you run your thumb across it, feeling the stiff, resilient surface. It is good fabric, tight and regular, and there is a quiet pride in that. You take a single strand of prepared horsehair from the tray and hold it up to the lamp, turning it so the light runs along its length. The hair is a little tapering at the tip, thicker at the root, and you note its particular thickness, the amount of spring it holds. No two strands are precisely the same, and part of the skill of weaving is in adjusting for these tiny variations, pressing a thicker strand with slightly more force, guiding a thinner one with a gentle touch. You place the hair across the warp threads, just in front of the last woven row, and you look at the loom as a whole, checking that the tension on the warp is even, that the harnesses are lifting correctly, that the track of the travelling carriage is clean and glistening with its thin film of tallow. Everything is ready. The shed around you is slowly coming to life. You hear the scuff of boots on stone, the quiet murmur of voices exchanging morning greetings, and the first creak and thump of other looms being set in motion. Someone lights another gas lamp, and a little flare of brighter light ripples across the ceiling. You take a breath that tastes of wool and oil and tallow, and you let it out slowly, feeling your shoulders settle. Then you reach for the hand lever that operates the carriage, the cool, smooth wood fitting into your palm like a handshake, and for a moment you simply sit, holding it, looking at the path the hair will travel, the 1,000 repetitions ahead that will build the fabric of the day. The morning mist has cleared entirely now, and through the window you can see the whole of the green hillside and a patch of pale, washed-out sky. A bird lands on the windowsill, glances in, and flies away. The water wheel turns. The stream runs. And you are here, at your loom, ready to begin. You stand at the sorting table by the window, your hands resting on the smooth, worn wood, and before you sits a fresh bundle of horsehair that you have not yet opened. It arrived late the previous week from the horsehair preparers in a town some miles down the valley, brought by cart along with other supplies, and it has been waiting on the shelf in its rough brown paper, tied with coarse twine. Now, in the quiet of the early morning, with the lamp burning steadily at your loom and the first pale daylight seeping through the glass, you turn your full attention to this bundle, because the preparation of the raw material is as important as the weaving itself, and it is a thing that cannot be rushed. You lift the bundle from the shelf, feeling its weight, which is not great, but is dense for its size, a compact heft that speaks of the many thousands of individual strands packed together. The paper wrapping is stiff and slightly dusty, and the twine has been knotted tightly, the knot a hard little knot of fibre that has been pulled snug against the paper. You work your thumb into the knot, loosening it with a patient, rocking motion, because pulling too hard would risk breaking the twine and leaving you with a loose end that is harder to manage later. After a few moments, the knot yields and the twine falls away, curling onto the table. You fold back the paper carefully, laying it flat, and inside is the hair, a dark, glossy mass that seems almost to breathe as it expands from its confinement, the strands shifting against each other with a faint, dry rustle. The smell rises to meet you at once, and it is a smell you know as well as your own skin. It is warm and slightly sweet, with a clean animal quality, like a horse that has been brushed and is standing in a sunlit stable, and there is a layer of soapiness from the washing. a mild, alkaline scent that reminds you of the soft soap used by the preparers to clean the hair of its natural oils and dirt. Underneath all of that is the deeper, earthier scent of the tail itself, the memory of the horse, of grass and hide, and the open air. You lean a little closer and draw a slow breath, letting the smell settle in your senses, because it is the first step in knowing the material, in understanding what the day's weaving will demand. With both hands, you reach into the open bundle and lift a portion of the hair free, letting it drape across your fingers. The strands are uniformly dark, a deep, cool black that in the thin morning light shows a faint bluish sheen, like the wing of a jackdaw. They are long, some exceeding 2 feet in length, and they are stiff, each one a round, solid filament that has not the softness of wool or the pliability of cotton. When you hold a single strand between thumb and forefinger and bend it, you feel the resistance, a springy pushback that ends in a sudden straightening when you release it, the hair snapping back to its natural, gentle curve. This resilience is the reason horsehair is used for upholstery. A fabric woven from it will hold its shape under years of pressure, rebounding when the sitter rises, never sagging, never losing its form. You lower the mass of hair back to the table and begin the sorting, which is a slow, methodical process that requires your full attention. You take a handful, perhaps 50 or 60 strands, and draw them loosely through your fingers, spreading them so they lie in a rough fan. Your fingertips, roughened and polished by years of this exact work, move over the hair, feeling for differences in thickness, texture, and length. A good weaving hair is even along its entire length, tapering only slightly from the root end, which is thicker and a little stiffer, to the tip end, which is finer and more flexible. You identify the root ends by their slight flare and their tendency to sit a little straighter, and you turn each strand as needed so that all the roots point in one direction. This alignment is a crucial part of the process because when the hair is woven, the natural direction must be consistent or the fabric will have an uneven surface and will wear poorly. As you sort, you occasionally find a strand that is not suitable. It may be too short, a tail trimming that's slipped into the bundle, or it may be split at the tip. A tiny fork that you can barely see but can feel as a roughness under your thumb. Sometimes there is a hair that is of a different color, a deep brown or a dusty gray, which would show in the finished fabric as an unintended fleck. These you also set aside, placing them in the small scrap basket. The vast majority of the bundle, however, is consistent, and it is this uniformity that allows the woven cloth to take on its characteristic deep, even tone. A monochromatic surface that from a distance appears a single, dignified charcoal. When you have sorted a small pile of aligned hair, you set the pile to one side and take up the wide-toothed comb. The comb is a simple tool, a flat piece of smooth, dark wood with a row of long, rounded teeth, each one worn to a dull shine. You hold it with a grip that is both firm and relaxed, and you draw it slowly through the hair, starting near the root ends and pulling smoothly toward the tips. The comb makes a soft, whispering sound, a gentle rasp as the teeth part the strands and slide through, and with each stroke the hair becomes more ordered, the individual filaments lying side by side in a tight, glossy ribbon. After each stroke, you lift the comb and tap it lightly against the table edge, and a few loose fibers and tiny fragments of dust fall away, drifting down to join a growing pile of debris that you will sweep up later. This tap is a rhythmic, automatic gesture, as much a part of the work as the combing itself. You comb the sections several times until the hair is perfectly smooth and all the minor tangles, the tiny locked knots where two strands have twisted around each other, have been worked free. Then you gather the hair together, compressing it gently with your fingers, and you roll it into a loose cylinder. The roll is not a tight one. You do not want to crease the hair or introduce a permanent kink that would show in the woven cloth. Instead, you roll it just firmly enough that the bundle holds its shape, and you place it in the shallow tray that sits on the bench beside your loom. This tray, made of tin with a rolled lip, will soon hold a dozen or more such bundles, each one a prepared supply of weft waiting to be fed into the warp. You return to the main pile of unsorted hair and take another handful, and the process repeats. This repetition is not dull but calming, a quiet, undemanding rhythm that allows your mind to settle into the fabric of the morning. Your hands move with an expertise that has become entirely automatic, freeing your thoughts to drift. You notice the way the daylight is now stronger through the window, the mist having fully cleared to reveal a pale blue sky streaked with high thin clouds like pulled wool. A sparrow lands on the outer sill, peers in with a bright black eye, and flits away, its wings making a small, quick flutter against the glass. Inside the shed, the other weavers are settling into their own rhythms, and the air begins to fill with the soft, composite sound of many looms working. The creak of wood, the thump of beaters, the intermittent click of shuttles being exchanged. It is a soundscape that has been the background of your life for many years, and you no longer hear it as separate noises. It is simply the sound of the shed, as constant as the stream. Back at the sorting table, you work through the entire bundle over the course of an hour. The pile of unsorted hair diminishes gradually, while the tray of rolled bundles grows, the pale tin disappearing under dark, orderly rows. At one point, you pause to refill the small bowl of tallow that stands on your bench, because the morning's work will soon require you to lubricate the carriage track of the loom, and you prefer to have it ready. The tallow is a pale, creamy substance with a faint, fatty scent, and you dip a finger into it, rubbing a small amount onto the metal track until the surface has a thin, even sheen. The track glistens in the lamplight, and you wipe your finger on your apron before returning to the table. Now, with all the hair sorted and combed, you perform a final check. You take one of the rolled bundles and unroll it partly, spreading a section of the hair flat on the table. You lean close, your eyes scanning the surface for any missed imperfection, any slight irregularity that might cause a snag in the weaving. You find none. The hair lies perfectly parallel, the strands as even as the warp threads on your loom. You re-roll the bundle and place it back in the tray, and you allow yourself a small, quiet moment of satisfaction. The material is ready, and it is good. The physical properties of the hair are not the only things that occupy your mind during this long preparation. You reflect, in a calm and unfocused way, on the origin of this material. Each strand came from the tail of a horse, a working animal that spent its days pulling a cart or a carriage or a plough, and the hair grew long and strong to swish away flies in summer to provide a natural protection. Now it is here, in this stone mill in Yorkshire, transformed into something entirely different. A fabric that will cover a seat in a railway carriage or a gentleman's library. The connection between the animal and the finished object is a quiet thread that runs through the entire process, and it gives the work a certain depth, a sense of continuity that you appreciate without ever putting it into words. You turn your attention to the bundles that will be used later in the day, and you lift them from the shelf, checking their condition. Some have been in storage for a few weeks, and you want to ensure that no dampness has crept into the paper. The air in the shed is cool but not wet, and the hair feels dry and crisp, exactly as it should. You loosen the twine on one bundle and probe inside with your fingers, feeling the cool, smooth strands. Everything is in order. You retie the twine and return the bundle to its place, and you note, as you do every day, the dwindling supply and the need to order more from the preparers before the end of the month. This small act of inventory is another quiet task that fits into the morning's flow, requiring little thought but providing a sense of order and preparedness. The light through the window has shifted again, the sun now touching the highest panes of glass and casting a faint warm parallelogram on the stone floor. The dust motes that drift in the air are more visible now, a slow, silent dance of tiny particles that catch the light and glint like minute sparks before fading. You watch them for a moment, your hands still, and the calm of the shed washes over you. There is no hurry, no pressing need to move faster. The day is long, and the work will be done at its own pace. One strand of hair at a time. You carry the tray of prepared bundles to your loom, setting it on the small shelf that is fixed to the right-hand side of the frame, a position that allows you to reach the bundles without looking. The arrangement is satisfying, the dark rolls of hair lined up in a neat row, ready for use. You place your hand on the smooth, worn lever of the loom carriage, not to move it yet, but simply to feel the connection between your body and the machine, the beginning of the long, steady rhythm that will fill the rest of the day. The preparatory work is now complete, and the morning has moved on a little further, and soon, when you are ready, you will begin to weave. The tray of prepared horsehair bundles sits on the shelf beside your loom, each roll neat and orderly, and you turn now to the warp, the long linen threads that run from the back of the loom to the front, forming the foundation into which the stiff black hair will be plaited. The warp on the beam is low, the pale ecru threads winding down to a thin, flattened layer on the wooden core, and you know that before you can begin the day's weaving, you must set a fresh warp, drawing new lengths of thread from the cones and guiding them through the loom's many parts. This is a task you do every few weeks when the cloth beam has taken up the last of the woven fabric and the warp beam stands nearly bare, and it is a task that requires a particular, unhurried patience, a willingness to stand and walk and bend and tie knots in a steady rhythm that cannot be quickened. You walk to the rear of the loom, where a sturdy wooden creel stands. The creel is a tall, angled frame with rows of smooth pegs, and on these pegs rest the cones of unbleached linen thread. Their surfaces are soft, dusty ivory. You select a fresh cone from the shelf below, lifting it carefully because the cones are heavy and the thread is fine but strong, and you seat it on a peg so that it can rotate freely as the thread is drawn. The linen gives off a faint, clean scent, something like dry hay or the sun-warmed grass of a summer field, and you note how the light from the window catches the tiny, almost invisible fibers that rise from the thread's surface, a gentle halo of softness. The first step is to extend a single thread from the cone and carry it forward toward the loom. You pinch the end between your thumb and forefinger, pulling a length of about an arm's span, and then you walk slowly toward the back rail of the loom frame, the thread trailing behind you in a delicate straight line. At the back rail, you find the first of the lease rods, smooth wooden sticks that separate the warp threads into alternating layers, keeping them from tangling. You pass the new thread over one rod and under the next, following the path of the previous warp ends that are still in place, and then you move further forward into the main body of the loom where the harnesses and heddles stand in silent rows. The harnesses are rectangular wooden frames, suspended from pulleys above and connected to the treadles below by strong cords. Within each harness, delicate wire heddles are set closely together, each heddle with a tiny eye at its center, like the eye of a needle. Your task is to thread every warp end through its correct heddle eye according to the pattern, and then through the reed that sits in front, a comb-like structure of fine metal wires set into a frame. The pattern here is a simple plain weave because the horsehair fabric requires only a stable, even ground, but still, each thread must pass through its designated heddle so that when you press a treadle, the harness lifts the correct threads and creates the shed through which the horsehair weft will travel. You choose a heddle hook from the small pouch on your apron, a thin metal rod with a tiny hook at its end, slightly polished at the grip. Standing at the side of the loom, you locate the first empty heddle in the first harness. Its eye a small, bright oval, and you pass the hook through it. Then you catch the linen thread with the hook, drawing it gently back through the heddle eye, the thread sliding with a faint whisper. You release the hook, pull the thread through by hand for a short length, and let it hang. The motion is repeated for the second harness, the heddle hook again piercing the eye, again catching the thread, again withdrawing it. Each time the thread rests in its heddle, one of a growing series of vertical lines that will soon number in the hundreds. Now you must thread the reed. The reed stands in the beater frame, a heavy wooden beam that swings forward to pack each weft row into place, and its metal wires are set like a fine, orderly fence. You take your reed hook, a thin, flat piece of steel with a small slot and hook at the end, and you pass it through the first dent, the narrow gap between two wires. The linen thread is caught once more, drawn through, and you let it fall forward over the breastbeam, the polished wooden curve at the front of the loom where the woven fabric will eventually slide. A small weight, a flat metal disc, is clipped to the thread's end to keep it under gentle tension, and it hangs there, swaying almost imperceptibly in the still air. You walk back to the creel, your footsteps a soft, regular scuff on the flagstones, and you draw the next thread from the cone, pinching the end and walking forward once more. The path you follow is always the same, over the lease rods, through the heddle of the first harness, through the heddle of the second harness, then through a dent in the reed, and finally a weight clipped to the thread. Each thread sits parallel to its neighbors, a quiet, incremental addition to the growing sheet of warp. Your body falls into a gentle rhythm, the turn at the creel, the measured walk, the bend to the heddles, the careful threading, the clip of the weight, and the return. The sounds of the shed wash around you, the distant thump of other looms, the creak of the water wheel, the intermittent call of a wagtail from the open doorway, and these sounds blend into a background that is as soothing as it is constant. After a time, your hands, moving without hurry, have threaded a group of perhaps 20 threads, and you pause to check the tension, running your palm lightly across the strings. They all hum with the same low, even note, a tactile music that tells you the tension is balanced. If any thread felt slack, you would adjust it at the back beam, turning a small peg to tighten its anchor. But today, all are good, the linen pulling straight and true. The harnesses and treadles, still motionless, wait for the moment when your foot will bring them to life. You understand their connection completely. The two harnesses are linked to the two treadles by cords that run over pulleys high above, and pressing one treadle pulls one harness down while the other rises, lifting alternating sets of warp threads to create the shed. The cords are strong, slightly darkened with age, and a light dressing of beeswax that gives them a subtle gloss. You test one treadle with your toe, pressing it just enough to see the harnesses shift, the heddles sliding on their metal bars with a soft, oiled sigh. And then you let it return, satisfied that all is in order. You resume the threading, moving along the heddles and the reed, and the sun outside continues its slow arc, the parallelogram of light on the stone floor, shifting and stretching. The warp grows, thread by thread, and after some time you have threaded the full width of the fabric, some 2 feet of closely set ends. You then return to the back beam, where the loose warp ends from the previous beam, which you have tied to the new threads with small, precise knots, will pull the new warp through as the old warp is wound forward. You check each knot, a tiny weaver's knot, made by crossing the old end and the new end and looping them quickly with a twist of your fingers, and every knot is sound, a neat, almost invisible join that will pass through the heddles and reed without catching. Now you go to the front of the loom and begin to turn the cloth beam handles slowly, winding the warp forward. The knots travel through the lease rods in a silent procession, then they come to the heddles. You watch each one, ready to ease a thread should it catch, but all pass through cleanly, the heddle eyes having enough room for the slight swelling of the knot. Then the knots reach the reed, and again you watch as each slides between the metal dents, a quiet, precise migration. After the knots have passed beyond the reed and hang loosely in front, you unclip the weights and gather the ends into a bundle, tying them to the apron rod, a wooden bar fixed to the cloth beam. With a series of even turns and a final bow knot, the warp is now secured at both ends, stretched from back beam to front, a taut, silent plane of pale linen. You take a moment to run your hand over the entire warp, pressing lightly with your palm to feel the uniformity of the tension. And the sensation is one of quiet order, a sheet of fibers so evenly stressed that it makes a faint, nearly imperceptible vibration under your touch. You then brush your hand over the heddle eyes, checking that no thread has slipped from its correct path, and you find everything in place. The reed sits straight in the beater frame, and you test the beater by pulling it gently toward you, the wooden frame swinging with a solid, dampened thump as the reed teeth push forward, then letting it return. The motion is smooth, the beater's pivot points lubricated with the same tallow you used on the carriage track earlier. All that remains is the final adjustment of the warp tension, done by turning a large wheel at the back of the loom that slightly rotates the warp beam, either releasing or taking up thread until the entire warp responds with the exact degree of tightness you prefer for horsehair weaving, which is firm but not so tight that the hair cannot be beaten into a compact self-jedge. You turn the wheel a quarter turn, then another, checking the tension with a light pluck of your thumb against the warp, and the note is a low, resonant hum, much like a deep string of a distant harp. Satisfied, you lock the wheel with a wooden pin. The shed around you has changed little in the time you have been working. The other weavers are at their own looms, and the gas lamps continue their steady, soft glow, now supplemented by the fuller daylight that fills the windows. You stand for a moment at the front of your loom, looking along the newly set warp, and there is a deep, quiet pleasure in the sight of those hundreds of ordered threads, each one a tiny, essential part of the fabric yet to come. The horsehair bundles wait in their tray, their dark gloss a contrast to the pale linen, and you feel the readiness of the loom, the way all its parts now align for the weaving that will soon begin. You wipe your hands on your apron, the movement slow and relaxed, and you take a drink of cool water from the stone bottle by your bench. The water tastes of the hills, clean and slightly mineral, and it washes away the small fatigue of standing. You are ready. The warp is set, the loom is prepared, and the quiet industry of the day can now continue, one dark hair at a time, woven into the waiting, taut, cream-colored field. You sit on the hard wooden bench before the horsehair loom, your posture upright but not stiff, the sort of posture that comes from years of working at a machine that demands a steady eye and a steady hand. The warp of pale linen stretches before you, a plane of orderly threads held under even tension, and in the tray, to your right, the rolled bundles of black horsehair wait, their dark gloss catching the lamplight. You have set the warp, prepared the hair, and now the weaving itself can begin, the slow rhythmic plaiting that will turn these separate materials into a single, unified fabric. The loom you work at is not like the other looms in the shed, the ones that weave woolen cloth with flying shuttles and a rapid clattering beat. Yours is a horsehair plaiting loom, a specialized machine built for a single purpose, and every part of it has been designed to handle the unique character of the stiff, springy weft. At the heart of its mechanism is a traveling carriage that rides on a polished metal track fixed across the front of the loom, just above the weaving bed. The carriage is a compact block of iron and brass, shaped to slide smoothly from left to right and back again, and from its underside hangs a row of small, weighted clips. Each clip is a tiny, precise thing, a pair of steel jaws that open and close with a gentle pinch, and each one is designed to hold a single strand of horsehair by its root end, suspending it vertically so that the tip hangs down into the warp. To the right of the carriage, a hand lever rises from the loom frame, its grip worn to a smooth, dark polish that fits the curve of your palm exactly. A series of connecting rods links this lever to the carriage, so that when you pull the lever toward you, the carriage slides across the track, carrying its row of hair strands from the loading position to the far side of the warp. A foot treadle, situated beneath the bench where your right foot rests, operates the harnesses, lifting alternating sets of warp threads to create the shed into which the hair will be placed. And directly in front of you, mounted on the heavy beater frame, is a comb-like beater made not of fine reed wires but of thick, parallel wooden teeth, like the teeth of a giant comb, each one rounded and dark with use. This beater is heavy, its weight measured so that when you draw it forward and release it, it swings down with enough force to pack the stiff horsehair firmly into the growing fabric edge. All these parts work together in a cycle that is slow and deliberate, a cycle you have performed so many times that your body knows it without the need for thought, yet your mind still attends to it with a calm, contented focus. You begin by taking a single strand of horsehair from the bundle nearest to you, unrolling the bundle just enough to free one hair without disturbing the rest. The hair comes away with a faint, dry rustle, and you hold it by the root end, feeling the familiar, cool, smooth surface and the slight flare of the thicker part between your fingers. You examine it for a few seconds, turning it in the lamplight to check for any flaw you might have missed earlier. Then you lean forward and insert the root end into one of the open clips on the carriage. The clip closes with a tiny, crisp click, a sound so soft that it would be lost in any larger noise. But here, in the closed space of your workstation, it is clear and distinct. The hair now hangs down from the clip, its tip just touching the warp threads below. The first step of the cycle is to create the shed. Your right foot presses the treadle, and with a low, oiled sigh, the two harnesses move, one rising and the other lowering. Half the warp threads lift with the rising harness, while the other half stay down, and between them a narrow triangular opening forms, a passageway through which the weft will travel. This shed is the same in principle as on any loom, but because the warp is set so closely and the final fabric must be extremely dense, the opening is slight, just enough for a single hair to pass. The linen threads, pale and luminous in the lamp glow, form a neat, angled division that stretches from the heddles to the last woven row, a temporary architecture that will vanish the moment the treadle is released. Now you reach for the hand lever and draw it toward you with a smooth, unhurried motion. The carriage slides along its track, moving from right to left, and the row of dangling hair strands. There are perhaps 8 clips on the carriage, though you load them one at a time when starting a new row travels across the width of the warp. The track is well lubricated with tallow, and the carriage makes a low, wooden rumbling sound, a sort of muffled rolling, as the brass wheels turn. You watch the hair you have just loaded pass between the raised and lowered warp threads, its stiff shape gliding without catching, and as it reaches the far left side of the loom, the carriage stops with a soft padded thud against a leather buffer. Here at the left side, the hair must be transferred from the clip to the fabric. You release the hand lever, and with your left hand you reach to the clip, pressing its jaws gently to release the hair. The strand drops a tiny distance, its tip now resting on the last woven row, and you immediately give it a slight half twist, a rotation of perhaps 90 degrees, using your thumb and forefinger. This twist is a small but essential action, the moment where the plaiting nature of the weave is realized, because unlike a simple over and under interlacing, the horsehair is turned slightly as it sits, causing it to lock against the warp and against its neighboring hairs with a tighter, more secure grip. The twist is so subtle that it is invisible in the finished cloth, but you know it is there, and you feel it under your fingers as a tiny increase in resistance, a pleasant, tactile confirmation. With the hair now seated in the warp, you return the carriage to its original position on the right side, pushing the hand lever away from you. The carriage rolls back, its empty clips swaying slightly, and again there is that soft, padded stop as it settles into place. You then release the treadle, and the shed closes, the warp threads returning to their neutral plane, enclosing the new hair weft. The warp is once again a single taut surface, but now it holds one more dark strand within its grip. The final action of the cycle is the beating. You reach for the heavy beater frame, grasping it by its smooth wooden handle, and you draw it toward you. The beater swings on its pivots, the thick wooden teeth passing through the warp threads, and you feel the weight of it as you pull it forward. Then, with a controlled release, you let it swing back, and the teeth slam gently but firmly into the newly placed hair, pushing it tight against the previous row. The sound this makes is a unique, satisfying thud, a woody, muffled percussion that is deeper than the clatter of a shuttle loom, almost like the tap of a mallet on a block of seasoned oak. The hair, being stiff and springy, resists slightly, then compresses, and the weave becomes that much denser, that much more compact. This entire sequence: load the clip, press the treadle, draw the carriage, release the hair and twist, return the carriage, release the treadle. Beat takes perhaps 20 seconds, and it is repeated without variation for every single strand of hair. You do not count the repetitions, you simply move from one to the next, one hair following another in a steady, unbroken flow. The tray of prepared bundles slowly empties, and the dark fabric on the cloth beam slowly grows. The rhythm is like a slow, calm breathing, a cycle that occupies your hands and feet, but leaves your mind free to wander among quiet, formless thoughts, or simply to rest, alert but still. The soundscape of your immediate space is dominated by the noises of this specialized loom. There is the soft click of the clip closing, the low rumble of the carriage, the heavier thump of the beater, and the faint sigh of the harnesses rising and falling. Beneath these, there is the gentle hiss of the oil lamp on its bracket, the creak of the wooden bench when you shift your weight, and the occasional soft rustle as you unroll a new bundle of hair. These sounds combine into a kind of muffled percussion, a slow, woody music that is entirely your own, distinct from the woolen looms that clatter and bang in other parts of the shed. It is a sound you have come to associate with deep focus and the passage of time, and it is as comforting as a familiar lullaby. The fabric that begins to emerge under your hands is unlike any other textile made in this mill. The horsehair, black and stiff, interwoven with a pale linen warp, produces a surface that is immediately distinctive. From a distance of a few feet, it appears a uniform, sober charcoal grey, the sort of dark, dignified tone that suits the interior of a railway carriage or a quiet library. But up close, as you see it under your lamp, the individual hairs are visible, each one a short, dark dash against the cream ground, laid in rows that run with a barely perceptible wave due to the half twist you give each strand. This texture has been compared, by those who care about such things, to the ridged surface of a walnut shell, a dense organic pattern that is both irregular and utterly regular. A product of nature translated through machinery. The density of the weave is a point of pride, and you check it frequently as you work, running a thumb across the newly beaten section to feel how the hairs sit. The fabric is stiff, almost board-like in its resistance to bending, yet when you flex it slightly, it shows a springy resilience that is the hallmark of good horsehair cloth. This stiffness is the reason the material is so highly valued for upholstery, because when it is stretched over the curved arm of a sofa or the seat of a dining chair, it forms a firm, smooth surface that will not sag or wrinkle, and it will continue to spring back, decades after it is first applied, maintaining its shape through thousands of sittings and risings. The hairs, each one a tiny resilient spring, collectively create a structure that is both strong and flexible, a perfect balance of properties that no other textile can quite match. As you weave, you remain aware of the need for constant, small adjustments. Not every strand of horsehair is perfectly uniform, and part of your skill lies in compensating for these differences. A slightly thicker hair requires a firmer beat to seat it level with its neighbors. A slightly thinner one needs a gentler touch, or the fabric will be uneven. The half twist you give each strand also varies subtly, because the natural curve of the hair can cause it to lie differently in the shed, and your fingers learn each strand's character in the brief moment you hold it before loading it into the clip. This sensitivity is developed over years, and it now operates below the level of conscious thought, a deep bodily knowledge that guides your hands without the need for deliberation. The loom itself is a sturdy, reliable partner in this work. You oil its moving parts each morning, and you check the tension of the cords and the alignment of the carriage track before beginning, and in return it gives you smooth, predictable motion day after day. The wooden frame, darkened with age and polished by the touch of hands, has a warm, almost living presence, and the way the lamplight falls on its complex arrangement of levers, rods and pulleys creates a pattern of shadows that shifts as you work, a quiet companion to the rhythm of the weaving. Outside the window, the Yorkshire day continues its slow unfolding. The pale sun that broke through the morning mist now covers the hillside in a cool silver light, and the sheep on the slopes have moved to new grazing, their white shapes like scattered stones against the green. Inside the shed, the air remains cool and still, smelling of wool, oil, and the clean animal scent of the horsehair, and the gas lamps maintain their steady, soft glow. Independent of the daylight, you are insulated from the outside world, enclosed in the small, purposeful bubble of your workstation, and the hours pass in a state of calm, absorbed industry. Periodically, you pause to reload the carriage clips. The clips hold enough hair for only a portion of a row, so you must stop every few inches to attach new strands, splicing the ends carefully so that the join is invisible in the finished cloth. You take a new hair from the tray, align its root end with the last hair in the row, and clip it into place. And then you continue the cycle, the join happening somewhere in the middle of the shed, where it will be beaten down and locked in with its neighbors. The splicing is a small task that requires a moment of focus, and then the rhythm resumes, the carriage sliding, the beater thumping, the treadle sighing. Occasionally, you stand to stretch your legs, walking a few steps to the stone trough for a sip of water, or to the sorting table to inspect a new bundle of hair by the window light. These small breaks are part of the rhythm too, punctuation marks in the long, continuous sentence of the weaving day. When you return to the bench, your hands find their places on the lever, and the treadle as naturally as a sleeper settles into a familiar pillow, and the cycle picks up again without a break in its steady, calming pulse. The specialized plaiting loom, with its carriage and clips and heavy beater, is not a fast machine. In a full day, you may weave no more than a foot or two of fabric. But speed is not the measure of this work. The measure is the quality of the cloth, the tightness of the weave, the evenness of the surface, and the knowledge that each strand of hair has been placed with care, twisted just so, and beaten firmly home. This is work that rewards patience, and patience is a quality you have in abundance, nurtured by years of quiet, solitary labor in the calm stone heart of the Yorkshire mill. The first full hours of weaving unfold in a steady, uninterrupted flow, the rhythm of the loom carrying you forward as the morning light, beyond the tall windows, gradually shifts. You have settled onto the wooden bench, your back straight and your feet resting lightly on the treadles, and your hands move through the familiar sequence without hurry. The shed is quiet now, the initial sounds of the day having blended into a steady background hum, and in your small corner by the window the only noises are those of your own machine, the soft click of a clip closing, the low rumble of the carriage on its greased track, the heavy, woody thump of the beater driving home another strand of stiff black hair. These sounds repeat in a cycle that has become so natural to you that it feels less like work and more like a form of quiet breathing, a bodily rhythm as steady as the turning of the water wheel outside. Your right foot presses the treadle, the harnesses lift and lower with a faint, oiled whisper, and the shed opens, a narrow, angled space between the pale warp threads. Your left hand draws the hand lever toward you, the carriage sliding smoothly to the left, carrying a single hair that hangs from its clip, its tip just above the waiting fabric. When it reaches the far side, you release the hair with a tiny squeeze of the clip, and your thumb and forefinger find the strand, giving it that brief half-twist as you lay it against the previous row. A motion so slight that an observer might not even see it. The carriage returns to its starting position, the treadle is released, the shed closes, and then your right hand grasps the beater frame and swings it forward, the heavy wooden teeth pressing the new hair tightly into the growing cloth. Then your hands return to their resting positions and the cycle begins again. One hair after another, each one taking its place in the long, orderly procession of the weft. Time passes without your notice, the way it does when you are entirely absorbed in a task that requires just enough attention to keep the mind still, but not so much that it becomes tiring. Your thoughts drift, but they do not fix on anything in particular. They are like the dust motes that float in the lamplight, moving slowly and aimlessly, settling nowhere. You are aware of the fabric growing, inch by patient inch, the dark surface with its subtle ridge texture slowly advancing as you work your way across the warp, row by row. Each time you complete a full pass, you wind the cloth beam forward by a fraction, turning a small handle that ratchets with a soft metallic click, and then you resume the weaving, your hands never fumbling, never pausing for long. The fabric itself has a particular character at this early stage, when only a few inches have been woven onto the new warp. The pale linen threads stand out more prominently near the fell, the edge of the weaving, and the black horsehair, row upon row, creates a dense, dark margin that slowly pushes back the cream-colored ground. Under the lamplight, the individual strands gleam faintly, their natural gloss catching the glow and then disappearing as they are beaten into the weave. You run your thumb over the surface from time to time, checking the density, and the sensation is one of firmness and coolness, like the cover of a well-made book. There is a quiet satisfaction in this texture, a sense of something durable and honest being created by your own hands, and you allow yourself to feel it without dwelling on it, a simple, wordless contentment that sits somewhere in the background of your awareness. The morning outside the window continues its slow transformation. When you first sat down at the loom, the sky was a pale, watery grey, the hillside shrouded in a thin haze that blurred the outlines of the stone walls and the scattered sheep. Now, as the hours pass, the haze begins to thin, and a weak, yellowish light starts to filter through the clouds, casting a faint, cool glow on the window panes. The glass is old and slightly rippled, and the light that comes through is soft and diffused, falling on your hands and on the loom in a gentle, even wash. You notice this change without looking up, aware of the shifting quality of the light as one might be aware of a change in temperature, and it marks the passage of the morning in a way that is more felt than measured. Small automatic adjustments punctuate your rhythm, actions so habitual that they require no conscious decision. The tension on the warp, you sense, has slackened just slightly, a tiny relaxation that comes as the new warp settles into its work. You reach behind you without looking, your hand finding the tension wheel, and you give it a quarter turn, feeling the tautness return through the threads that press against your fingertips. A little later, the carriage track begins to emit a faint, high note, a sign that the tallow has worn thin in one spot. You take a small amount from the bowl on your bench, rubbing it onto the metal with your thumb, and the note disappears, replaced by the smooth, rumbling silence you expect. Then a strand of horsehair proves slightly thinner than its neighbors, and you adjust the force of the beater, letting it swing with a lighter touch so that the row remains even. These interventions are small and fleeting, brief eddies in the steady current of the work, and they leave no ripple behind. As the fabric grows, the spliced joins between horsehair strands disappear into the weave. You have become adept at overlapping the ends of two hairs so that the transition is invisible, the root of one hair lying beside the tip of another, both secured by the same beat of the beater. In the finished cloth, no one could ever find these joins. They are hidden in the dense, dark texture, part of the overall pattern. You take a careful pride in this invisibility, not a pride that speaks aloud, but a quiet, internal acknowledgement of a job done properly. Each successful splice is a tiny achievement, and there are many of them in a morning, each one performed with the same calm attention. The atmosphere of the shed contributes to the rhythm, wrapping around you like a familiar garment. The air is cool but not cold, kept at a steady temperature by the thick stone walls and the heat from the gas lamps and the bodies of the workers. It carries the composite smell you know so well, the clean, earthy scent of the horsehair, the faint acidity of the lubricating oil, the dry, powdery smell of wool dust from the other looms, and the ever-present undertone of damp stone and running water from the stream. These smells combine into something that is not unpleasant, a thick, layered odor that is the signature of the mill, and after a few minutes in the shed you no longer notice it at all, except when you step outside and the freshness of the air surprises you. Around you, the other weavers are at their own looms, each one enclosed in a similar bubble of rhythm. You can hear the distant clatter of a flying shuttle on one of the woolen looms, a rapid, percussive sound like the tapping of a woodpecker, and from further down the shed comes the low, rhythmic creak of a large beam being wound. Someone coughs, a dry, short sound, and then there is silence again, but for the machines. There is very little talk, the work does not require it, and the noise of the looms would make conversation difficult anyway. Instead, the workers communicate through small gestures when necessary, a raised hand, a nod, a brief exchange of looks, and then they return to their tasks. It is a companionable isolation, each person alone with their work, but also part of a larger shared industry, and it suits you. The bench you sit on is hard, its surface shaped by years of use, and you shift your weight from time to time to ease the pressure on your spine. The posture required is upright, leaning slightly forward, with your arms held at a comfortable angle to the lever and the beater. Your body knows this posture intimately, and it has adapted to it over the years, your muscles and bones arranging themselves into a shape that is both efficient and relaxed. There is no strain in it, only a steady, balanced tension that allows you to work for hours without fatigue. If you were to stand up suddenly, you would feel a brief stiffness in your shoulders and lower back, but while you are seated and weaving, the body feels as if it is exactly where it belongs. The length of fabric on the cloth beam grows very slowly, its dark, stiff surface rolling incrementally forward. You pause every so often to measure the progress, not with a rule, but with your eye, comparing the width of the woven section to the span of your hand. In a good morning, you might weave 8 or 9 inches, and you are on pace for that, the rhythm having settled into an efficient, unhurried tempo. The quality of the cloth is your only real concern, and as you examine it, you see that it is good, the weave tight and even, the surface flat, the selvage straight and clean. The selvage, the edge of the fabric where the weft turns back, is a particular point of attention, because a poorly made selvage can unravel or pucker, but you have mastered the art of drawing each hair to just the right tension before beating it home, and the edges are as neat as the center. The morning draws on, and the weak sun climbs a little higher, its angle changing so that the parallelogram of light on the flagstone floor shifts slowly across the stones, moving from one worn patch to another. You notice this shift only when you glance up to stretch your neck, your gaze passing over the windows, the rows of looms, the other weavers bent over their work, and then returning to the close immediate world of the warp and the weft. The gas lamps remain lit, their flame steady in their glass chimneys, and the combined light of gas and day gives everything a soft, slightly amber cast, like an old photograph slowly developing. Your mind, freed from the need to plan or decide, enters a state of calm, receptive stillness that is one of the quiet rewards of this kind of work. Thoughts arise and pass without demanding attention. A memory of the walk to the mill this morning, the feel of the cold water on your hands at the trough, the image of the patient cart horse in the yard. These mental fragments float through your awareness and then dissolve, leaving behind a gentle, pleasant emptiness. There is no worry in this state, no anticipation, only the immediate presence of the task and the sensory world around it. The click of the clip, the rumble of the carriage, the thump of the beater become a kind of gentle mantra, a repeated sound that soothes the mind and keeps it anchored in the present moment. You notice, without breaking stride, that a small tuft of loose hair fibers has accumulated at the base of the reed, swept there by the repeated motion of the beater. You reach for the soft brush that hangs on a hook at the side of the loom, and with a few light strokes you clean the area, the dark fibers falling into a small pile on the floor. Later you will sweep the entire workstation, but for now, this small cleaning is enough to keep the mechanism free of debris. You hang the brush back on its hook and resume the weaving, the interruption so brief that it is barely an interruption at all. Another strand of horsehair slips from your fingers as you try to load it into the clip, a tiny failure that happens perhaps once or twice a day. You catch it before it falls, pinching it between finger and thumb, and you try again, the clip closing with its usual soft click. There is no frustration in this, it is simply part of the work. A small reminder that even the most automatic skill requires occasional attention. You give the hair a slight extra twist as you lay it in the shed, compensating for the brief delay, and then the rhythm swallows the moment and continues. The fabric's surface continues to grow, its dark salt and pepper texture becoming more pronounced as more rows are added. The contrast between the black horsehair and the cream linen warp is subtle, a quiet, understated pattern that from a distance reads as a single, dignified grey. Up close, however, it is intricate, the individual hairs like tiny, dark strokes of a pen laid down in neat, horizontal lines. You pause to look at a section that you wove earlier, now rolled a little forward on the cloth beam, and you see that it has already taken on the stiff, resilient character of finished horsehair cloth. When you press your thumb into it, the surface resists and then springs back, leaving no indentation. This is cloth that will outlast you, cloth that will still be covering a chair seat 50 years from now, and the thought is a quiet, satisfying one, a sense of contributing something lasting to the world beyond the mill. The sounds of the shed shift subtly as the morning progresses. The initial, subdued quiet of the first hour gives way to a fuller, more established hum as all the looms find their rhythm. The water wheel outside provides a constant, low background, its deep creak and splash, a foundation for the higher, sharper noises of the machinery. You hear, very faintly, the sound of a cart passing on the road beyond the mill yard, the iron-shod wheels grinding on the stone, and then it fades, leaving only the mill sounds again. A door opens somewhere, and a brief draught of cooler air reaches you, carrying a hint of the damp, earthy smell from the stream. Then the door closes, and the warmth of the shed returns. You take a drink of water from your stone bottle, the liquid cool and clean, and you hold it in your mouth for a moment before swallowing. The bottle is beaded with condensation, and your fingers leave faint marks on its surface. You replace it on the shelf and wipe your hands on your apron, the canvas rough and dry. Then you settle back onto the bench, your body finding its familiar posture with the ease of long habit, and you begin the cycle again, the click clicking, the carriage rumbling, the beater thumping. The morning has now advanced well into its middle hours, and the rhythm has become so steady, so all-encompassing, that you lose track of the individual repetitions. They blend into a single continuous flow of motion and sound, a river of small actions that carries you along without effort. Your hands and feet move with a coordination that is entirely automatic, leaving your mind free to float in a calm, alert state that is half awareness of the work and half a pleasant, drifting reverie. The horsehair, the loom, the shed, the light, all of it merges into a unified experience of quiet industry, and you are simply present in it, neither happy nor sad, neither eager nor sad, but deeply, peacefully absorbed. The bell rings, and it is a single deep bronze note that swells out of the mill tower, travelling across the cobbled yard and up the green hillside until it fades into the grey sky. The sound is so familiar that you hardly register it as a separate event. It is simply the voice of midday, as regular as the turning of the water wheel, and as much a part of the day's structure as the warp on your loom. The moment the note sounds, your hands pause, the carriage stops halfway along its track, and you sit back on the wooden bench, letting the rhythm that has carried you through the morning come gently to a halt. All around the shed, the same thing is happening. The other looms fall silent one by one, their clatter and thump dying away until the only sounds left are the steady creak of the water wheel, the quiet murmur of the stream outside, and the soft, distant call of birds in the eaves. The sudden stillness has a weight to it, a presence that fills the long room like water filling a basin. After hours of continuous motion and sound, the quiet feels almost tangible, a soft pressure on your ears, and you take a slow breath, letting the peace of it settle over you. The gas lamps continue their steady hiss, their flames burning with a calm, even light, but the dust motes that danced in the air during the busy morning now drift more slowly, as if they too have paused for the midday rest. You shift on the bench, feeling the stiffness in your shoulders that comes from sitting in one position for a long stretch, and you allow yourself a small, slow stretch, your arms rising and your spine arching slightly before you relax again. The first thing you do, as you do every day at this hour, is clean your hands. They are darkened with the fine, greasy dust that the horsehair leaves behind, a mixture of natural oils and tiny broken fibers, and the skin feels slightly rough and dry. You walk to the stone trough in the corner of the shed, where a cold tap runs continuously, its water coming straight from the hillside stream that powers the mill. The trough is a simple rectangular basin carved from a single block of local stone, its edges worn smooth by generations of hands, and the water that splashes into it is so clear that you can see every detail of the stone's grey, speckled surface. You take a lump of the coarse, sandy soap that sits in a wooden dish beside the trough, work up a thin lather, and scrub your palms, your fingers, and the spaces under your nails. The soap has a faint, alkaline smell, something like clean straw, and it cuts through the grime effectively, leaving your skin tingling. After rinsing, you splash a handful of the cold water onto your face. The chill, a brief, pleasant shock that sharpens your senses and washes away the small fatigue of the morning. You dry your hands and face on a clean rag that you keep on a peg near the trough, and then you return to your workstation, feeling refreshed. From the small cupboard beneath your bench, you retrieve your midday meal, wrapped as always in a clean, white linen cloth and tied with a simple knot. The bundle is compact, its contents simple, and you carry it with you as you walk toward the large loading door at the far end of the shed. The loading door is a wide, heavy wooden structure, its planks dark with age and reinforced with iron straps, and it is usually kept open a few feet during the day to allow fresh air to circulate. Today it stands open about a yard, and a cool, damp breeze flows through the gap, carrying with it the smells of the outside world. Wet stone, green grass, the clean mineral scent of the stream, and the faint, far-off hint of wood smoke from a cottage chimney somewhere up the valley. You find your usual spot just inside the doorway, where a low wooden bench sits against the wall. From here, you have a clear view of the mill yard, a cobbled square that slopes gently down toward the stream. The yard is empty now, but for the patient cart horse that you saw earlier in the morning, still standing between the shafts of its cart, its head low and one hind hoof cocked in a relaxed posture. The horse is a large, sturdy animal with a coat the color of dark earth and a thick black mane that falls in a heavy curtain along its neck. Its tail, too, is long and full, the coarse hairs sweeping nearly to the ground, and you find yourself looking at those hairs, noting their texture and their spring, the way they catch the pale light that filters through the high clouds. Even during your rest, the work is never entirely absent from your mind. The material you weave is always there, in the living form of the animal, a connection that runs quietly beneath everything you do. You untie the knot of the linen cloth and spread it across your lap. Inside, there is a thick slice of bread, its crust dark and chewy, its interior a soft, dense white. Beside it lies a small wedge of hard cheese, pale yellow and slightly crumbly at the edges, with a faint, nutty scent that comes from a well-aged cheddar. A single pickled onion, small and brown and glistening, completes the meal, along with a stone bottle of cold tea. The tea is unsweetened, steeped strong in the morning and left to cool, and it has a bitter, refreshing taste that quenches your thirst without heaviness. You eat slowly, without hurry, breaking the bread into small pieces and chewing each mouthful thoroughly, feeling the simple, honest flavors fill your senses. The cheese has a sharp, salty tang that contrasts with the mildness of the bread, and the onion adds a bright, acidic crunch. There is a deep, quiet pleasure in this meal, not because it is elaborate, but because it is exactly what you need. Plain food, well made, eaten in a moment of complete peace. As you eat, your gaze drifts across the yard, and your thoughts settle into a calm, unfocused observation. The cobblestones are dark with the damp of the morning, and in the shallow depressions between them, small puddles have formed, their surfaces reflecting the pale, overcast sky like fragments of a broken mirror. A single sparrow hops across the stones, pecking at something invisible, then flits away into the eaves of the stable building that stands on the far side of the yard. Beyond the stable, the green hillside rises steeply, a patchwork of rough pasture divided by dry stone walls, and the sheep that dotted the slopes earlier are now lying down, their white shapes motionless against the grass. Higher still, the clouds are beginning to thin, and the light has a soft silver quality, a diffuse brightness that holds the promise of afternoon. The cart horse shifts its weight, one hoof scraping against the cobbles with a dry, hollow sound, and then it sighs, a great huffing exhalation that steams in the cool air. You watch the animal with a quiet, wordless attention, noting the patient, enduring quality of its posture, the way it accepts the weight without restlessness. Its mane, that thick fall of black hair, moves slightly in the breeze, the strands separating and then coming together again, and you think, without forming the thought into words, of the bundle of hair waiting on your sorting table, the way those same stiff, glossy strands will be combed and aligned and woven into fabric. The horse is both a living creature and, in a sense, a future roll of upholstery cloth. And there is a strange, gentle continuity in that, a cycle that connects the field, the stable, the mill, and the distant drawing room where a chair will one day be covered in the product of your labor. The minutes pass, and they pass slowly, with a weightiness that is rare in a working day. You finish the bread and cheese, wipe your fingers on the cloth, and lift the stone bottle to drink the last of the cold tea. The liquid is cool and clean, washing away the final traces of the meal, and you replace the bottle on the bench beside you. There is still a quarter of an hour before the bell will ring again, and you have no intention of filling it with anything useful. This half hour is yours, a small empty space in the middle of the day that is as necessary to the work as the tallow that lubricates the carriage track, because without it, the steady concentration of the morning would become brittle and wear thin. You fold the linen cloth into a neat square, tucking in the corners with the same careful precision you apply to your weaving, and then you lean back against the stone wall, letting your body relax completely. The wall is cool even through your shirt, its surface rough and solid, and the sensation is grounding, a reminder of the thick, ancient stones that enclose the shed. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but simply to rest them, and you listen to the sounds of the yard, the steady, trickling murmur of the stream as it flows past the mill, the distant bleat of a sheep on the hill, the quiet creak of the cart horse's harness as it shifts again, and the soft, intermittent cooing of a wood pigeon from the trees by the water's edge. These sounds are gentle and sparse, each one isolated in the quiet air, and together they form a kind of natural music, a background that is neither intrusive nor demanding. When you open your eyes, the scene before you has changed only minutely. The light has brightened just a little, the clouds, now thinning enough to allow a faint, watery sun to cast weak shadows across the yard. The puddles catch this new light and glint, and the cart horse, sensing perhaps the subtle shift, lifts its head and looks toward the stable, its ears pricking forward for a moment before relaxing again. You watch all of this with a calm, detached attention, the way one watches a slow-moving river, noticing every small detail without needing to name or react to it. Your mind is quiet, not empty, but stilled, like a pool of water after the wind has dropped. There are no worries here, no pressing concerns. The morning's work is behind you, the afternoon's work lies ahead, and this moment in between is a gift of stillness that you have learned to accept fully. The other weavers are scattered around the shed, each in their own chosen spot for the break. A few sit on benches similar to yours, their meals wrapped in cloth or paper, their expressions distant and relaxed. Two men stand near the trough, talking in low voices, their words a soft murmur that carries no meaning across the distance. One woman has brought out a small piece of knitting, and her needles click with a tiny, regular rhythm as she works. her gaze fixed on the growing fabric in her lap. There is a sense of communal ease in the shed, a shared understanding that this half hour is a boundary between the morning and the afternoon, a necessary pause that everyone respects. No one rushes, no one looks at a clock. The bell will tell them when it is time, and until then, the world outside the mill does not intrude. You think briefly of the walk you will take this evening, the familiar path along the stream and up the lane to your cottage, and of the small fire you will light in the grate, the simple supper of broth and bread that you will prepare. These thoughts are not plans so much as gentle anticipations, a quiet awareness of the shape of the hours to come. Then the thoughts fade, and you are back in the present, watching the cart horse as it lowers its head to nuzzle at a stray piece of hay on the cobbles. The horse's movements are slow and deliberate, its large dark eyes half closed, and there is a peacefulness about the animal that communicates itself to you, a sense of acceptance and quiet endurance. The stream continues its endless murmur, the same water that turned the mill wheel this morning and will turn it all afternoon, flowing down from the high moors and past the mill yard on its way to the river in the valley below. You can see a portion of its course from where you sit, a glint of moving silver between the stone walls of the channel, and the sound of it is so constant that it has become a kind of silence in itself, a background noise that the ear no longer hears but would miss if it were gone. The water is clear and brown with the peat of the hills, and it carries small dark leaves and the occasional twig, spinning them slowly as it flows. A slight breeze stirs the air, and you feel it on your face, cool and clean, carrying with it the faint, sweet scent of the gorse that grows on the hillside. The scent is brief, there and then gone, replaced by the familiar smells of the mill yard, but it leaves a small, pleasant impression, a reminder of the wider world beyond the stone walls and the looms. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the fresh air, and you feel your body settle even more deeply into the rest, the last traces of tension leaving your shoulders and your neck. The minutes drift by, and soon you become aware that the break is nearing its end. There is no clock visible, but your internal sense of time, honed by years of this exact routine, tells you that only a few minutes remain. You sit up a little straighter on the bench, fold the linen cloth one final time, and tuck it back into the waistband of your trousers. Your hands are clean and dry, your thirst is quenched, and your body feels rested and ready. The idea of returning to the loom is not a burden, but a quiet, familiar call, a return to the steady rhythm that will carry you through the afternoon. A moment later it comes, the same deep bronze note, swelling out of the mill tower and echoing across the yard. The cart horse lifts its head briefly at the sound and then returns to its dozing. The sparrow flits from the eaves to the stable roof. The other weavers begin to stir, folding away their meals, stretching their arms and drifting back toward their looms. You rise from the bench, your legs a little stiff from sitting, and you walk slowly across the shed toward your workstation. The gas lamps, still burning as they have burned all morning, seem to glow a little brighter as your eyes readjust to the interior light, and the loom waits for you in its corner by the window, silent and patient. You hang your cloth on its peg, take your seat on the wooden bench, and place your feet on the treadles, your hands on the lever and the beater. The rhythm of the morning is still there, just below the surface, waiting to be picked up again, and you take a last quiet moment before you begin, looking out the window at the pale silver sky and the green hillside, carrying the peace of the midday pause with you as you settle back into the work. The bell's echo fades into the high rafters of the shed, and the brief, suspended stillness of the midday pause begins to dissolve as the sounds of the mill gradually resume. You are already seated at your loom, your hands resting lightly on the smooth, worn lever and the cool iron of the beater frame, and your feet have found their familiar positions on the treadles without any conscious direction. The oil lamp on its bracket burns with its steady, small flame, and the warp of pale linen stretches before you, a quiet, waiting field. Around the shed, the other weavers are settling onto their benches, and the first clatter of a flying shuttle, followed by the answering thump of a beater, breaks the silence, a signal that the afternoon has officially begun. You take a slow breath, smelling the familiar blend of wool dust, lubricating oil, and the clean animal scent of the horsehair, and then you reach for the first strand of the new session. The afternoon light is different from the light of the morning, and as the hours pass, this difference becomes more pronounced. The pale, watery sun that struggled through the clouds earlier has now matured into a softer, more diffused illumination, a high, silver-grey canopy that spreads evenly across the sky and sends a cool, shadowless glow through the tall windows. The glass, old and slightly waved, catches this light in a way that makes the panes appear almost opaque, like sheets of still water, and the view of the hillside beyond is softened, the green of the grass and the darker patches of gorse blending into a single, muted wash of colour. Inside the shed, the gas lamps continue to burn, their amber flames now competing with the fuller daylight, and the combination gives the air a pleasant, layered quality, a gentle glow that wraps around the looms and the workers alike. You begin the weaving cycle again, your body recovering the rhythm of the morning with the ease of long practice. The clip clicks softly as you load a strand of horsehair. Your right foot presses the treadle. The harnesses lift and lower with their quiet, oiled sigh, and the shed opens between the warp threads, a narrow, orderly division. The hand lever comes toward you smooth and familiar in your palm, and the carriage rumbles across its track, carrying the hanging strand to the far side. There your left hand releases the hair from the clip and gives it the small, essential half-twist as you lay it against the previous row, the stiff black strand seating itself between the pale linen threads, with a faint, almost inaudible rasp. The carriage returns, the shed closes, and the heavy beater swings forward and back, packing the hair firmly home with its deep, woody thump. One cycle complete. Another begins. The continuity between the morning and the afternoon is seamless, as if there had been no pause at all. The fabric that you left at noon, its dark, textured surface ending in a clean, straight line of weft, now waits to be extended, and you pick up exactly where you stopped, the next hair aligning neatly with the last. The splice join between the old session and the new is made with particular care because it will mark a subtle boundary in the finished cloth, a line that a careful observer might one day notice but would never identify as a stopping point. You overlap the tip of the new hair with the root of the last, beating them together so that they lie flat and secure, and then you continue, the join disappearing behind you as the row advances. The rhythm of the afternoon has a slightly different quality from that of the morning, a difference that you feel rather than think about. In the morning, the work had a sense of establishment, of settling into the day and building the momentum that would carry you forward. Now, with the hours stretching evenly ahead and the fabric already well underway, the work feels more like a steady, sustained flight, a level cruising at a comfortable altitude. There is less need for adjustment, less checking and tuning. The loom is warm and responsive, the horsehair bundles are consistently good, and your hands and feet move with a coordination that feels entirely effortless. You are not working so much as allowing the work to happen through you, your body a calm, reliable conduit for the motion of the machine. Your attention occasionally narrows to observe a single section of the fabric as it takes shape under your hands. There is a particular satisfaction in watching a row of horsehair being added, the way the individual strands, each one slightly different in thickness and curve, come together to form a uniform surface. The black hair, interwoven with the cream warp, creates a texture that is intricate and subtle, a pattern of tiny, dark strokes laid in horizontal rows. When you run your thumb over the newly woven area, you can feel the slight ridges that each weft row creates, a fine, regular corrugation that is the physical signature of the plaiting process. The fabric is stiff and dense, and it resists your thumb with a springy firmness that speaks of its future life, stretched over a curved chair seat and compressed by the weight of a sitting body, always rebounding, always holding its shape. As the afternoon advances, the light outside continues its slow, imperceptible transformation. The high, silver clouds that arrived around midday thicken slightly, and the illumination becomes even more diffuse, a soft, shadowless radiance that seems to come from everywhere at once. The windows, which earlier showed the green of the hillside and the shapes of the sheep, now reflect more than they reveal, their panes becoming mirrors that catch the amber glow of the gas lamps and the darker silhouettes of the looms. You notice this change only when you lift your gaze from the weaving to stretch your neck, your eyes adjusting briefly to the middle distance before returning to the close, immediate world of the warp and the weft. The temperature in the shed has risen a little during the course of the day, warmed by the collective heat of the gas lamps and the bodies of the workers and the continuous friction of the machinery. It is not warm enough to be uncomfortable, merely a gentle ambient warmth that contrasts with the cool freshness of the morning. The air feels thick and still, carrying its composite of smells with a slightly heavier intensity. You shift on your bench, adjusting the position of your shoulders, and you note the way your shirt clings lightly to your back, a reminder of the physical presence of the work. A drink from your stone bottle of cool tea refreshes you, the liquid still slightly chilled from the morning's preparation, and you replace the bottle on its shelf before resuming your posture at the loom. The consistency of the horsehair is a quiet point of interest as the afternoon wears on. The bundle you are currently working from, one that you prepared early in the morning, has a particularly fine quality, the strands uniformly thick and glossy, with a deep bluish-black sheen under the lamplight. They handle beautifully, sliding into the clips with a smooth precision and lying in the shed without resistance. You appreciate this without saying so even to yourself, a quiet professional satisfaction that is simply part of the background of your awareness. Later bundles, will have a slightly different character because the hair, though carefully sorted and prepared, retains a natural variability that is part of the material's charm. The weaver's skill is to adapt to these subtle differences, adjusting the twist and the beat pressure so that the finished cloth remains consistent. And this adaptation is now so automatic that you scarcely notice doing it. The repetition of the weaving cycle allows your mind to enter a state of calm, floating attention, a condition that is neither focused nor distracted, but somewhere in between. You are aware of the sounds of the shed, the rhythmic clatter of the woolen looms, the muffled thump of your own beater, the distant creak of the water wheel, the soft, intermittent call of a wagtail from the loading door. These sounds blend into a continuous, soothing backdrop, and your thoughts, unmoored from any particular concern, drift gently. Sometimes they settle on the memory of the morning's walk, the feel of the damp cobbles under your boots, and the grey mist clinging to the hedgerows. At other times they rise to the image of the cart horse in the yard, its patient, dark form silhouetted against the pale cobbles. These thought fragments are fleeting and diffuse, like the dust motes in the lamplight, and they pass without leaving any trace. The fabric on the cloth beam has now grown by several inches since the beginning of the afternoon, its dark, dense surface rolling slowly forward with each winding of the ratchet. You pause occasionally to examine this new section, comparing it to the morning's work, checking the selvedge and the overall density. The selvedge remains straight and clean, each weft hair turned back at the edge with an even tension that creates a firm, slightly reinforced border. The body of the fabric is tight and uniform, its surface free of any gaps or irregularities. This inspection is brief and methodical, a routine check that requires only a few seconds of your time, and then you return to the weaving, satisfied that the quality holds. A small practical task interrupts the weaving when you notice that the carriage track, which you lubricated earlier in the day, is beginning to show signs of drying. You reach for the bowl of tallow that sits on the bench to your left, dip a finger into the pale, creamy substance, and run it along the metal track, spreading it in a thin, even layer. The tallow has a faint, fatty scent, not unpleasant, and it melts slightly under the warmth of your finger. The carriage, when you slide it again, moves with a renewed smoothness, the faint metallic note replaced by the low wooden rumbling that indicates a well-oiled mechanism. You wipe your finger on the rag that hangs from the loom frame and continue as before, the small act of maintenance absorbed seamlessly back into the rhythm. The afternoon deepens, and with it comes a subtle shift in your own physical awareness. The early afternoon had a feeling of refreshment, the benefit of the midday rest and the cold water at the trough. Now, as the hours accumulate, a gentle, pleasant tiredness begins to make itself known, not a fatigue of exhaustion, but the deep, satisfying weariness that comes from sustained, quiet labor. Your shoulders feel heavy in a good way, and your eyes have settled into a soft, relaxed focus on the weaving bed. There is no urgency to push through this feeling because the work does not demand speed, only steadiness, and your steady pace has not faltered. If anything, the tiredness enhances the meditative quality of the task, smoothing the edges of your thoughts and drawing you deeper into the simple, physical reality of the loom. You notice during a brief pause to reload a clip that the other weavers seem to share this mood. The shed is quieter now than it was in the morning, the conversations that broke out occasionally at the start of the day having long since ceased, and the workers at their looms appear as absorbed in their tasks as you are in yours. The woman who was knitting during the break is now at her loom, her head bent in concentration, and the two men who talked by the trough work in silence at opposite ends of the shed. The communal rhythm has become a single, unified pulse, each individual's work contributing to the larger, quiet purpose of the mill. You reach for a fresh bundle of horsehair from the tray, unrolling it with a practiced twist of your fingers, and you note that the tray is now more than half empty. The morning's preparation, which seemed so generous at the time, has been steadily consumed by the patient, incremental progress of the weaving, and you estimate that you have enough hair left for perhaps 2 more hours of work. After that, you will need to prepare more bundles, returning to the sorting table and the wide-toothed comb for another session of alignment and combing. The thought is not unwelcome. The variation in tasks, minimal though it is, keeps the day interesting in a quiet, subtle way, and you look forward to the feel of the raw hair in your hands, the cool, springy strands and their clean, earthy scent. The fabric you are weaving now has a particular character that pleases you. The horsehair in this section came from a batch that was slightly coarser than average, the individual strands just a little thicker and stiffer, and the resulting cloth has an especially pronounced texture. The ridged surface, that walnut shell appearance, is more defined, the dark dashes of the weft standing out boldly against the cream warp. You know that this section will be especially durable, a portion of the roll that will find its way onto a seat that sees heavy use, perhaps in a railway waiting room or a busy hotel lobby, and it will withstand the wear with a quiet, enduring strength. There is a quiet pride in that, a sense that your work matters in some small, lasting way. Outside the window, the day has continued its slow passage, and you become aware, without looking directly, that the light is beginning its long, gradual decline toward evening. The silver-grey sky that dominated the early afternoon now has the faintest hint of something warmer, a barely perceptible softening that suggests the sun is sinking behind the high clouds. The windows, which earlier reflected the interior of the shed, are now darker, showing the first suggestions of the dusk that will eventually gather. The gas lamps seem to glow a little brighter in response, their amber light taking on a richer, more prominent quality. You adjust the wick of your own lamp slightly, turning the thumb wheel to raise the flame a fraction, and the weaving bed is bathed in a warm, steady circle of light. You take a moment to rest, leaning back on the bench and letting your hands fall into your lap. Your right hand, which has gripped the lever for hours, feels slightly stiff, and you flex the fingers slowly, feeling the joints pop with a soft internal sound. Your left hand, which handles the hair and the clips, has a fine dark dusting of hair fragments on the fingertips, and you rub them together to brush it away. You drink the last of the tea from your stone bottle, the liquid now room temperature and still faintly bitter, and then you set the empty bottle aside. The pause is brief, no longer than a minute, and then you lean forward again. Place your feet on the treadles and pick up the rhythm where you left off. The afternoon's long, uninterrupted flow has carried you far from the midday break, and the fabric that was only a few inches long at the start of the day is now a substantial roll on the cloth beam. You do not measure it exactly, but estimate by the diameter of the roll, which has grown from the thin core of the beam to a thickness that you can feel when you place your palm against it. The work of the day, combined with the work of the previous days, has produced a length of cloth that is impressive in its quiet, unassuming way, a testament to hours of patient, repetitive labor. And yet, there is no sense of urgency to finish, no rush to complete a certain amount. The work will continue tomorrow and the next day, and for all the days after that, each one adding its small, measured contribution to the growing roll. The water wheel turns, the stream runs, the looms clatter and thump, and you sit at your place by the window, weaving the stiff black hair into the pale linen warp. The afternoon wears on in its calm, steady way, and you're content. The afternoon has deepened around you, the light through the tall windows now a soft, diffuse grey that speaks of the slow approach of evening, and you find yourself at a natural pause in the weaving. The carriage sits at the far end of its track, a strand of hair half loaded, and you decide to let it rest while you turn your attention to something you have been meaning to examine. A completed roll of horsehair fabric, one that you wove earlier in the week and that has been waiting on a storage shelf. its surface gathering the quiet dust of the shed. You rise from the bench, your legs a little stiff, and walk to the wooden shelving unit that stands against the wall near the sorting table, where several rolls of finished cloth are stored upright, each one wrapped in a protective sheet of unbleached cotton. You select a roll from the middle shelf, not the most recent, but one from several days ago, its outer wrapping cool and slightly rough under your fingers. The cloth sheet is tied with a length of twine, and you carry the roll to a clear space near the window, where the light, even as it wanes, is still the best in the shed for a careful inspection. You place the roll on the wide wooden sill, untie the twine, and fold back the cotton wrapping, revealing the fabric beneath. The cloth is wound tightly around a sturdy wooden core, and its exposed edge presents a cross-section of the weave. Dozens of dark, hair-thin lines alternating with the pale linen, packed so closely that the individual threads are barely distinguishable. The surface of the roll, where the outer layer lies flat, is a quiet, dignified charcoal grey, a color that seems to absorb the light rather than reflect it, and it has the even, sober appearance of something made to last. You unroll a length, perhaps 2 feet, letting it drape over the sill and your hands. The fabric resists unrolling. It is stiff, almost board-like in its reluctance to bend. When you flex it, the fibers creak softly, a dry, rustling sound like the brushing of whiskers, and then it springs back, straightening with a slow, resilient motion. This is the first quality you always notice, the cloth's memory, its insistence on returning to its original flat plane. It is why upholsterers prize this material, because when it is stretched over a curved chair seat and tacked down along the edges, it holds its shape under sitting weight without sagging, always rebounding. You bend the fabric into a U shape and release it. The rebound is not a snap, but a dignified, gradual return, and it leaves no crease behind, only the faintest whisper of a line that fades as you watch. Holding the fabric up to the window, you study its color and pattern. From a distance of a few feet, the cloth appears a uniform, sober gray, the kind of dark neutral that blends into any interior without calling attention to itself. But as you bring it closer, the texture reveals itself. The weft is composed of short, parallel hair strands, each one a dark dash against the cream-colored warp, arranged in tight, orderly rows. The effect is a subtle salt and pepper pattern, a monochromatic intricacy that catches the eye only upon close inspection. Under the fading daylight, the black hairs have a faint bluish sheen, like the wing of a jackdaw, while the linen warp remains a soft, warm ecru. Together, they create a surface that is both rich and understated, a fabric that does not demand admiration but quietly earns it. You run the flat of your hand over the cloth, feeling the texture. It is not smooth like wool or silk. It is granular, slightly rough, with a regular fine ridging where each weft row sits against the next. Your fingertips, roughened by the work, can detect the tiny variations in thickness from strand to strand, a faintly undulating contour that is the fingerprint of the natural material. The sensation is not unpleasant. It is like touching a well-made tool handle or a piece of seasoned oak, something solid and honest. When you press your thumb firmly into the fabric, the weave compresses a fraction and then pushes back, the thousands of individual hairs acting as a collective spring. The depression your thumb leaves disappears immediately, the surface restoring itself with a quiet, physical certainty. You turn the fabric over. The reverse side is a little paler, the warp threads more dominant, but still tight and even. The selvages, the long edges where the weft turns back, are perfectly straight, each weft hair looped around the last warp thread and drawn in with just enough tension to create a firm, reinforced border. You run a fingernail along the selvage. It is compact and smooth, with no loose hairs or gaps. A poorly made selvage can unravel over time, but this one will not. It will hold. Holding the fabric close to your face, you inhale its scent. The smell is faint but distinct, clean and slightly animal, the original horsehair contributing a warm, earthy note, overlaid with the dry, grassy smell of the linen warp and a trace of the tallow used to lubricate the loom. There is no mustiness, no hint of the storage shelf. The cloth is fresh and wholesome, smelling of the mill itself. You find the scent reassuring in a quiet way, a reminder of the material's origin, of the horses that grew this hair, and the Yorkshire water that washed it clean. You bring the fabric to your ear and, holding it taut, blow gently through the weave. Air passes with a faint, scratchy whisper, a sound like dried grass rubbing together. The fabric is dense but not airtight. It breathes, which is another reason for its use in upholstery, because a seat covered in horsehair will remain cool in summer and warm in winter, the tiny spaces between the hairs allowing a slow circulation of air. This quality, along with its resilience, makes it ideal for the heavy use of public spaces and the quiet comfort of private homes alike. Now you examine the cloth more methodically, holding it at arm's length and scanning its surface for any imperfections. There are none that you can see, no broken warp threads, no gaps where a hair might have slipped, no uneven beating that would create a visible streak. The weave is consistent throughout, the product of hours of steady, patient work, and you feel a quiet, private satisfaction that you would never voice aloud. This is good cloth, as good as any you have made, and it will serve its purpose well. As you study the fabric, your thoughts drift, as they often do during these moments of quiet inspection, to the journey this roll will take after it leaves the mill. The cloth you weave does not come back. It is shipped to upholsterers in the towns and cities beyond the valley, and from there it is cut and stretched and tacked into place, covering the seats of railway carriages, dining chairs, settees, and even the interior walls of horse-drawn omnibuses. You imagine the finished object, perhaps a deep-buttoned leather chair in a gentleman's library, its back and arms covered in this very horsehair, the dark grey fabric contrasting with polished wood and brass nail heads. A man sits reading by the fire, the light falling on the fabric, and the chair creaks softly as he shifts his weight, the horsehair cushioning him with its firm, springy support. The cloth does its job without fuss, unnoticed but essential, the quiet backbone of a comfortable room, or perhaps it becomes the seating in a first-class railway carriage, the kind that travels a long distance between London and Edinburgh. The carriage interior is rich with polished mahogany and brass lamps, and the seats, covered in horsehair, offer a firm, durable surface for passengers who read newspapers and look out at the passing countryside. The fabric withstands the vibration of the train, the constant friction of clothing, the weight of generations of travellers, and still it holds its shape. The Scottish countryside glides past the window, hills and lochs and stone cottages, and the horsehair seat remains as firm as the day it was upholstered, a silent witness to 1,000 journeys. Or perhaps this roll will find a less grand but equally worthy home, covering the seating in a quiet country inn where travellers stop for a meal and a rest. The cloth will be stretched over a settle by the fireplace, its dark grey blending with the smoky shadows of the room, and it will be polished smooth by the backs and thighs of farmers, shepherds, and passing carters. It will absorb the warmth of the fire, the smell of ale and wood smoke, and it will become part of the inn's character, as familiar and unremarkable as the flagstones on the floor. In every setting, the fabric serves the same quiet purpose: durability, comfort, and a modest, unassuming dignity. You run your thumb over the surface once more, tracing the subtle ridges, and you think about the individual strands that make up this piece. Each hair came from the tail of a working horse, an animal that spent its days in a field or a stable, and each was washed and combed and sorted by hands you'll never see before arriving at your loom. You placed each one in the warp, gave it a half twist, and beat it firmly home, and now, here in the quiet light, those thousands of separate actions are fixed forever in a single, unified fabric. The thought is a calming one, that the work of many hands, human and animal, has come together in this roll of cloth, and that the cloth will outlast them all, a small monument to patient industry. You re-roll the fabric carefully, matching the original tightness so that no dust will settle between the layers. The cotton wrapping goes back over the roll, and you tie the twine with a neat, secure knot, just as it was before. You hold the roll for a moment longer, feeling its weight, its density, and then you place it back on the shelf, next to its companions, each one a similar length of quiet achievement. The shelf is a modest library of your labor, and you regard it with a calm, wordless contentment before returning to your loom. The carriage track waits for you, the half-loaded strand still in its clip, and you settle onto the bench, your hands finding their places. The light outside has dimmed a little more, the afternoon now well advanced, and you adjust the wick of your lamp, the flame rising with a soft hiss. You look at the warp, the pale threads, the dark weft, the fabric already on the beam, and you begin to weave once more, carrying with you the refreshed awareness of what the finished cloth will become, the quiet pride in its character, now a gentle, steady presence in your mind, as the afternoon continues its slow, peaceful decline. The light through the tall windows has softened further, the silver-grey sky now deepening into a quiet, uniform slate that carries the first faint intimation of dusk. You've been aware of this change for some time without marking it consciously, the way you were aware of a room growing cooler, but now, as you finish a row and pause to flex your fingers, you lift your gaze to the glass and see that the outlines of the distant hillside have begun to blur, the green fading into a muted, shadowy brown. The gas lamps, which all afternoon held their own against the daylight, now stand out more prominently, their amber flames painting warm, trembling reflections on the worn flagstones and the dark wooden frames of the looms. The shed, which in the full light of day felt open and airy, has begun to contract into a smaller, more intimate space, the corners and rafters retreating into a soft, comfortable glue. You are nearing the end of the afternoon's weaving, and the rhythm that has carried you since the midday bell still holds, but it has slowed just perceptibly, as if your body knows, without being told, that the working day is drawing to a close. The clip closes on a final strand of horsehair, with its familiar small click. The treadle is depressed, the shed opens, the carriage rumbles across its track, and your left hand forms the little half-twist that has become as automatic as breathing. The beater swings forward and back, its deep, woody thump sounding perhaps a little more pronounced in the growing quiet of the shed. Then your hands stop, resting on the smooth, worn surfaces of the lever and the frame, and you let out a slow, even breath. The last weft of the day has been laid and beaten home. For a full minute, you simply sit, allowing the stillness to settle around you. The sounds of the shed, which have been a constant background throughout the day, are beginning to diminish. Some of the other looms are still running, their shuttles clattering and their beaters thumping, but you can hear, one by one, the subtle pauses as other weavers reach the ends of their own tasks. The mill is winding down in a gradual, orderly fashion, the way a complex machine decelerates part by part rather than all at once. The water wheel outside, whose steady creak has underscored every hour of the day, seems to turn a little more slowly now, its splashing a softer, lazier sound in the quiet air. You lean to your right and take the last prepared bundle of horsehair from the tray, unrolling it just enough to check its length. There is a little left, perhaps enough for the first few rows of the morning, so you carefully splice the end of the last weft strand to the start of this new bundle, overlapping the tips with a small, precise motion, so that when you begin again tomorrow, the warp will hold a continuous strand, and the fabric will show no gap or break. The join is a tiny, almost invisible knot of hair, and you press it gently into the warp with your thumb, satisfied that it will hold. This is the final action of the weaving itself, a small, forward-looking gesture that bridges the end of today with the start of tomorrow. Now begins the routine of closing down the loom, a sequence of tasks that you perform in the same order every evening, each one a quiet ritual of care and respect for the machine that serves you. You stand from the bench, your back straightening with a mild, pleasant ache, and you stretch your arms slowly, feeling the release of muscles that have been held in one position for a long stretch. Then you turn to the small shelf below the bench and retrieve the oil can, a simple brass container with a long, slender spout and a cork stopper. The oil inside is a light machine, oil pale and clear, and it smells faintly of minerals, a clean, almost cool scent. You walk around the loom to its far side, where the main pivot points of the beater frame are located. The pivots are iron, set into seasoned oak, and they have been warm with friction throughout the day. You place the tip of the spout against the first joint and apply a few drops, watching the oil seep into the narrow gap between metal and wood, darkening the surrounding timber. The oil absorbs with a soft, satisfying sound, a tiny, wet sigh that speaks of metal relaxing after its labors. You move to the other pivot, then to the linkage where the treadle cords run over their pulleys high above, reaching up with the can to let a few drops fall onto each leather-lined wheel. The cords themselves, sturdy and slightly darkened with age, receive a quick wipe with an oily rag, just enough to keep them supple and prevent fraying. Next, the carriage track demands attention. The long metal rail, polished bright by the constant passage of the carriage wheels, is smeared with a thin residue of spent tallow mixed with microscopic fragments of horsehair and linen. You take the rag, now slightly oily, and run it along the entire length of the track, cleaning away the greyish film and revealing the bright steel beneath. Then, from the bowl of tallow on the bench, you take a fresh dab on your finger and spread it evenly along the rail, leaving a thin, glistening layer that will protect the metal overnight and be ready for the morning's first slide. The tallow is cool and smooth, and it has a mild, fatty scent that mingles with the mineral smell of the oil. The clips on the travelling carriage, those tiny steel jaws that have opened and closed 1,000 times today, are next. You take a small brush, no larger than a toothbrush, with soft bristles, and you gently sweep each clip, removing any stray fibers that might have become lodged in the mechanism. The clips gleam dully in the lamplight, their surfaces polished by constant handling, and you check that each one opens and closes with a crisp, precise snap. One clip feels slightly stiff, so you apply a pinprick of oil to its hinge and work it a few times until the motion is as smooth as all the others. This small correction is the kind of preventative care that keeps the loom running true for years, and you perform it with the same patient attention you give to every other task. The heavy beater, which has swung forward and back in its relentless steady arc since the morning, now hangs motionless in its frame. You inspect its wooden teeth, each one thick and rounded like the tine of a giant comb, and you run your thumb along their edges, checking for any splinter or crack. The wood is dark with age and polished to a dull sheen by the countless strands of hair it has compacted. Finding no damage, you wipe the beater clean with the rag, removing the faint dusty buildup of hair fragments that has accumulated on its surface. Then you lubricate its pivot points, a few drops of oil applied carefully, and you test its swing with a gentle pull, the frame moving silently and smoothly on its bearings. Now you turn your attention to the fabric on the cloth beam. The roll has grown substantially during the day, the dark, stiff cloth winding around the wooden core in a tight, even cylinder. You take the clean cotton sheet that hangs on a peg nearby and drape it over the roll, tucking the edges under and around so that the entire length of woven fabric is covered and protected from dust. The cotton is soft and white, and it settles over the dark horsehair like a calm, clean shroud, hiding the day's work from view until the roll is full and ready to be shipped. You smooth the cotton with your palm, pressing out any wrinkles, and then you step back, satisfied that the cloth is secure. The warp, still stretched taut from back beam to breast beam, requires a slight slackening to prevent it from taking on a permanent set overnight. You go to the back of the loom, where the large tension wheel sits, and you turn it a quarter rotation, easing the pressure on the threads. The warp relaxes with an almost imperceptible sigh, the pale linen lines softening just a fraction. Then you return to the front and place a small, clean cloth over the exposed warp near the reed, a simple guard against moths and the drifting dust of the shed. The tools that have served you all day are gathered from the bench and the sorting table. The wide-toothed comb, its teeth still holding a few stray hairs, is cleaned with a careful brushing, the dark fibers falling into the scrap basket. The small shears are wiped and closed, their blades meeting with a quiet, precise snick, and they are placed into a leather sheath that hangs from the side of the loom. The awl and the beating block, the heddle hook and the reed hook all receive a quick wipe with the oily rag, a protective film against the damp Yorkshire air. Each tool is returned to its appointed place, the hooks in their small leather pouch, the comb on its peg, the shears on their hook. The bench, after a day of constant use, is now clear and orderly, its surface wiped clean and ready for the morning. You take the soft, long-handled brush that hangs from a nail on the loom frame and sweep the area around your workstation. The flagstones beneath the loom have collected a fine, dark dust composed of horsehair fragments, linen fibers, and the powdery residue of tallow and oil. You sweep this debris into a small pile, working the brush in slow, methodical strokes that raise a faint, drifting cloud of dust, which settles again in the still air. The pile is scooped into a small metal pan and emptied into the scrap basket, which will itself be emptied by the mill's cleaner in the morning. The floor around your loom is now clean, the stones dark and smooth, and the whole workstation has the neat, composed appearance of a tool chest at rest. Your apron, which has been your companion throughout the day, is heavy with the dust and grime of the work. You untie the strings at your waist, the knot loosening easily under your fingers, and you pull the apron over your head. The canvas is stiff and dark in places, marked with the oils and fibers of 100 similar days, and it carries the strong composite smell of the shed. You fold it, not neatly but practically, into a rough square, and you hang it on its wooden peg near the lamp, where it will air overnight and be ready for you in the morning. The removal of the apron is a small symbolic act, a physical shedding of the day's labor, and you feel lighter for it, your shoulders and chest free of the familiar weight. Now you turn to the oil lamp on its bracket. The flame has burned steadily since the early morning, its small yellow tongue steady and unwavering within the glass chimney. You reach for the brass thumbwheel at the base of the burner and turn it slowly, watching the flame shrink. It draws down from a bright, lively glow to a small, bluish bead that hovers just above the wick, a tiny, concentrated spark of heat. Then, with a final gentle turn, the flame extinguishes, leaving a thin, curling wisp of smoke that rises into the metal hood and disperses, its acrid scent briefly sharp in the air before fading. The glass chimney is warm to the touch, and you let it cool for a moment before replacing the small wire cage that protects it. The light at your workstation is now gone, but the shed is still illuminated by the other gas lamps and the last grey glow from the windows. Around you, the other weavers are performing their own closing rituals, the shed filling with the soft, communal sounds of cleaning and putting away. There is a sense of shared, quiet purpose in these final minutes, a collective winding down that is as ritualized as the morning's start. No one speaks loudly. A few low murmurs of farewell pass between neighbors, a raised hand, a nod, and then the workers move toward the doors, their footsteps scuffing on the stones. You take your jacket from the peg where it has hung all day, the brown tweed cool and slightly damp from the shed's atmosphere. You shake it out and put it on, the sleeves familiar and comfortable. Your stone bottle, now empty, goes into your pocket, and the cloth that wrapped your midday meal is folded and tucked away. You cast a last look at your loom, standing silent and orderly in its corner. The covered fabric roll a pale shape in the dimness, the warp relaxed, the tools stowed. The machine has served you well today, and you leave it with a quiet, unspoken sense of gratitude, a feeling that is part affection and part respect for a trusted partner. You walk toward the main door, passing the other looms as they fall silent, one by one. The shed, which this morning was a bright, bustling cavern of industry, now feels like a library after closing, the air still and heavy with the memory of the day's noises. The gas lamps are being turned down in sequence, and the shadows lengthen, swallowing the far corners and the high rafters. You pause at the door to look back, your eyes tracing the long rows of looms, the dark timber posts, the tall windows, now nearly black. The scene is one of complete, tranquil stillness, a pause between the labor of today and the labor of tomorrow. You step through the doorway into the cool, damp air of the mill yard. The cobbles are dark with the moisture of the early evening, and the puddles from the morning have merged into larger, shallow mirrors that reflect the grey sky and the first faint stars beginning to appear. The cart horse is gone, its stable door closed, and the yard is empty and quiet. The stream, ever present, continues its endless murmur, and the water wheel, finally still for the night, drips with a slow, rhythmic plash, each drop a small, separate note in the hush. You stand for a moment, breathing the fresh air, feeling the coolness on your face and the solid cobbles under your boots. The sky is a soft, deep grey, the clouds still holding but beginning to break apart in the west, where a pale, lemon-coloured band of light marks the last of the sunset behind the hills. A single bird, a swallow perhaps, flits across the yard and disappears into the eaves of the stable. The air smells of wet stone, clean water, and the green, living scent of the hillside, so different from the oily warmth of the shed. Then, with the day's work complete and the night settling gently over the valley, you turn your steps toward the lane, toward the walk home and the simple evening that awaits. The mill stands behind you, a dark, solid shape against the twilit sky, its chimney a silent sentinel, its windows dark and still. The quiet descends fully, and you walk on, your footsteps, the only sound on the cobbles, leaving the sleeping mill to its rest. The mill yard lies quiet behind you as you step onto the cobbled lane that leads away from the water wheel and the tall chimney and the dark, silent windows of the weaving shed. The stones under your boots are damp with the cool moisture of the early evening, their surfaces worn to a smooth, dark gloss by decades of feet and cartwheels, and they reflect the pale grey of the sky in a way that makes the lane seem to glow faintly. A soft meandering ribbon of light leading you home. The air is cool and still, carrying the clean mineral scent of the stream and the faint sweet smell of wet grass from the fields that rise on either side, and you draw a slow deep breath, letting the freshness of it fill your lungs and wash away the last traces of the shed's oily warmth. The sound of the water wheel, which has been a constant companion through every hour of the working day, grows fainter with each step you take. At first it is still distinct, a low, rhythmic creak and splash that you can identify among all other noises. But as the lane curves gently around the base of the hill and the mill building slips behind a fold of the land, the sound begins to soften, to blend into the general murmur of the stream, until it is no longer a separate thing, but simply part of the valley's quiet voice. The stream itself remains close, running in its stone-lined channel beside the lane, and its water, clear and brown, whispers over the stones with a ceaseless, gentle hush that is as old as the hills that feed it. The hedgerows on either side of the lane are dark and dense, their hawthorn and elder branches interlacing in a thick, tangled mass that holds the shadows of the evening within it. The leaves are still, no breeze stirring them, and they glisten faintly with the dampness of the air, each tiny droplet catching what remains of the light. A few late flowers, small and white, dot the green darkness, and their scent, mild and slightly honeyed, reaches you in faint, intermittent waves as you pass. Somewhere within the hedgerow, a small bird rustles, a brief, scratching sound of feathers against twigs, and then it is still again, settling into its roost for the night. The lane is empty but for you, and your footsteps, steady and unhurried, are the only human sound in the landscape. The light continues its slow, graceful decline. The sky above, which was a soft, uniform slate when you left the mill, has now begun to break apart in the west, the cloud layer thinning to reveal a band of pale, lemon-colored light that sits just above the dark line of the hills. This last remnant of the sunset is gentle and cool, more a memory of the day than a presence, and it casts no shadows, only a faint, diffuse glow that softens every outline. The hills themselves are becoming indistinct, their green slopes merging into a single dark silhouette against the paling sky, and the scattered sheep that dotted the pastures are now invisible, folded into the gathering dusk. The first few stars, faint and tentative, prick the darker blue of the eastern sky, and you notice them without pausing, a quiet acknowledgement of the night's arrival. You walk at a steady, comfortable pace, the same pace you walk every evening, a pace that your body knows as well as it knows the rhythm of the loom. There is no hurry in it, no sense of rushing toward the end of the day. The walk itself is a kind of transition, a gentle unwinding of the mind as the body moves through the cooling air, and you have learned over the years to savor it as a quiet pleasure, a half-hour of solitude between the communal industry of the mill and the solitary peace of your cottage. Your mind, which all day has been occupied with the close, focused attention of the weaving, now loosens and expands, drifting gently among formless, peaceful thoughts. You think, in a calm and unfocused way, of the work that you completed today. The image of the roll of finished fabric, covered in its clean cotton sheet, rises in your memory, and with it comes a quiet, wordless satisfaction. The weaving was good, the cloth tight and even, and the hours passed without incident, each strand of horsehair taking its proper place in the orderly rows. You do not dwell on any particular moment, the memories are general and soft, a composite impression of the day rather than a sequence of events. The feel of the lever under your palm, the click of the clips, the thump of the beater, the glint of the lamplight on the dark hair roll, of these blend into a single, soothing recollection that runs in the background of your thoughts like the stream runs beside the lane. Other thoughts come and go, light and transient. You consider, briefly, the meal you will prepare when you reach the cottage, the simple broth that you left simmering on the hob this morning, now cooled and ready to be reheated, and the loaf of bread that you baked 2 days ago, its crust now firm and chewy. You think of the small fire you will light in the grate, The pleasant task of arranging the kindling in the coal, the first curl of smoke, the warmth that will slowly fill the small stone room, these anticipations are not urgent. They are gentle, comforting shapes in the quiet of your mind, and they bring with them a sense of approaching rest. The lane begins to climb a little, rising from the level ground beside the stream to a gentle slope that leads up toward the cluster of cottages where you live. The cobbles give way here to a packed earth path, still firm but softer underfoot, and the hedgerows retreat a little, opening the view on one side to a sloping meadow where the grass, long and uncut, moves in a slow silver wave as a faint breath of wind finally stirs. The wind is cool and light, barely enough to feel on your cheek, but it carries with it the distant, clean smell of the high moors, a scent of heather and peat and open space. You pause for a moment on the crest of the slope, not because you are tired, but because the view, even in the fading light, is a quiet, beautiful thing. Below you, the valley spreads out in a dark, peaceful patchwork, the stream a glinting thread, the mill a solid, dark shape with its chimney standing against the sky. A single light, a lantern perhaps, glows in one of the mill's lower windows, a small, warm point in the gathering dusk, and you know that the night watchman is beginning his rounds, walking the silent shed with his lantern and his quiet, measured steps. You turn from the view and continue along the path which now levels out and approaches the first of the cottages. Your cottage stands a little apart from the others, at the end of a short, narrow lane that branches off the main path, and it is a simple stone-built structure with a slate roof and a single chimney at one end. The walls are thick, made of the same grey stone as the mill, and the window, a small deep-set square of glass, glows faintly with the reflected light of the sky. A low stone wall encloses a tiny garden, now mostly dormant, with a few hardy herbs growing close to the door, their leaves dark and fragrant. You push open the wooden gate, its hinges creaking with a familiar homely sound, and you walk the short flagstone path to the door. The door is heavy oak, darkened with age and fitted with an iron latch that lifts with a simple, solid click. You step inside, and the cottage receives you with its familiar, quiet embrace. The air is still and cool, a little cooler than outside because the thick stone walls hold the temperature of the earth, and it smells faintly of the peat fire that you will soon light, of the dried herbs that hang from the ceiling beams, and of the clean, simple scent of stone and wood. You close the door behind you, and the sound of the outside world, the stream and the wind and the distant sheep, fades to a low, muffled hush. The silence inside the cottage is different from the silence of the mill shed. It is a smaller, more personal silence, shaped by the walls that enclose only you. You remove your jacket, hanging it on a wooden peg by the door where it will air overnight, and you step out of your boots, setting them neatly on the stone slab beneath the peg. The floor of the cottage is flagstone, like the mill shed, but here the stones are covered in a few places by small woven rag rugs, their colours faded to soft browns and greys. The main room is not large, but it is high-ceilinged, with exposed dark beams and a small, deep-set window that faces the valley. The furniture is simple and sturdy, a wooden table, 2 chairs, a dresser with a few plates and cups, a rocking chair by the hearth. Everything is clean and orderly. The surface is wiped, the hearth swept, and the room has the patient, waiting quality of a space that is ready for its occupant. Your first task, as it is every evening, is to light the fire. The hearth is a wide, deep alcove of blackened stone, and the grate is laid with the remains of this morning's fire, a bed of fine, pale ash and a few charred fragments of wood. You kneel on the rag rug before the hearth, and from a small basket beside the grate, you take a handful of dry kindling, thin sticks of pine, a few twists of dried grass, a scrap of tinder cloth. These you arrange in a loose, airy pile over the grate, and then you select a few small lumps of coal from the black scuttle. Their surface is dull and dusty, and you set them carefully over the kindling so they will catch the flame, but not smother it. You take a lucifer from the box on the mantel, strike it with a quiet, rasping scratch, and touch it to the dried grass, which flares instantly with a bright, crackling flame that casts dancing shadows on the stone walls. The kindling catches, the flames grow, and soon the coal begins to glow at its edges, a deep, orange-red smoulder that promises warmth. You watch the fire for a moment, adding a few more lumps of coal as the flames settle into a steady, comfortable burn, and then you rise, brushing the ash from your hands. The room begins to warm, the heat spreading slowly from the hearth and pushing back the cool, still air. You light a single candle from the fire, its flame small and steady, and you place it on the table, where its soft light illuminates the center of the room. The shadows retreat to the corners, and the cottage takes on its evening character, a place of rest and quiet and simple comfort. Now you turn to your supper. The broth pot sits on the hob, a cast-iron vessel with a heavy lid, and when you lift the lid, the scent of it rises to meet you, a rich, savory smell of vegetables and barley and a little mutton cooked slowly until the flavors are deep and blended. The broth is cooled during the day, a thin layer of fat congealing on its surface, and you set the pot over the fire, hanging it from an iron hook that swings over the flames. The heat begins to revive it, and soon small bubbles rise to the surface, a gentle simmer that fills the room with its wholesome, comforting aroma. You slice a thick piece of bread from the loaf, the crust crackling under the knife, and you set it on a wooden board with a small pat of butter that is softened in the warmth. While the broth heats, you wash your hands and face at the small stone sink in the corner, the water cold from the pump and refreshing on your skin. You dry yourself on a clean towel, and then you sit at the wooden table, the candle flickering gently beside you, and you eat your supper slowly, spoonful by spoonful, the broth warm and nourishing, the bread chewy and good. The meal is simple and satisfying, and you eat it without hurry, your mind still and peaceful, your body relaxing into the warmth of the fire and the quiet of the room. When you have finished, you wash the bowl and spoon at the sink, setting them to dry on the wooden rack, and you wipe the table clean. You bank the fire for the night, pushing the glowing coals into a compact mound and covering them with a layer of fine ash, so they will smolder slowly and be ready to revive in the morning. You add a single, larger lump of coal at the top, which will catch the smolder and keep the room from growing too cold before dawn. The fire settles with a low, soft crackle, its light reduced to a faint, warm glow at the heart of the ash. You take the candle from the table and climb the narrow wooden staircase that leads to the bedroom. The stairs creak under your weight, a familiar, homely sound, and the candle flame sways with your movement, casting wavering shadows on the whitewashed walls. The bedroom is a small, simple room under the eaves, with a sloping ceiling and a single window that looks out onto the dark, still shape of the hillside. The bed is a sturdy wooden frame with a thick horsehair mattress, and you note with a quiet, private smile the fabric of the mattress cover. A dense, grey cloth that you wove yourself some years ago, its surface still firm and resilient after all this time. The sheets are clean and cool, and the pillow is soft and full. You place the candle on the small nightstand, its flame the only light in the room, and you undress slowly, folding your clothes and laying them on the wooden chair by the bed. You sit on the edge of the bed for a moment, looking out the window at the night sky. The clouds have cleared now, and the stars are bright and numerous, scattered across the dark like tiny, distant sparks. The hillside is a black, silent shape against the star field, and the stream, though distant, is still audible, a faint, persistent murmur that threads through the quiet. The air in the bedroom is cool, but the warmth from the fire below rises through the staircase and keeps the chill at bay, and you feel a deep, bone-deep tiredness that is entirely pleasant, the earned weariness of a day of steady, honest work. You lie down, pulling the blankets up to your shoulders, and you feel the mattress receive you with its firm, springy support, the thousands of horsehairs within it compressing and then holding, a final quiet echo of the work you do each day. The candle flame flickers softly on the nightstand, and you watch it for a few moments, its small, bright shape a calm focus in the dark room. Your breathing slows, your eyelids grow heavy, and the thoughts that have drifted through your mind all evening begin to dissolve, leaving only a peaceful, empty stillness. You think, without forming any clear words, of the morning, of the walk back to the mill along the familiar lane, the hedgerows and the stream and the grey stone walls, the bundles of hair waiting on the shelf, the loom standing ready in its corner. But those thoughts are for tomorrow. Tonight there is nothing more to do, nowhere else to be. The day is complete, its final thread woven and beaten home, and the quiet night enfolds you. You reach over and extinguish the candle with a soft, brief breath. the flame disappearing into a curl of smoke and the room falling into a deep, comfortable darkness. You settle back onto the pillow, and the sounds of the night wrap around you, the faint, distant murmur of the stream, the soft settling of the cottage timbers as they cool, the tiny, occasional creak of the fire below. You feel the weight of the blankets, the support of the mattress, the cool air on your face, and you let go of the last, trailing threads of awareness. Sleep comes gently, without hurry, rising around you like the slow, peaceful tide of the evening mist, and you drift into it with the ease of long practice, a weaver at rest, a quiet life, unwinding into the deep, untroubled darkness of the Yorkshire night.